Good evening. My name is Tim Sullivan. I'm filling in for Kathy Ellis tonight. She could not be here. This is the Policy Subcommittee meeting held at the George M. Romm Little Theater, Brockton High School, 470 Forest Ave, Brockton, Mass. It's Tuesday, August 15th, 2023 at 5 p.m. The agenda items are as follows. 1, call a meeting to order. 2, BHS cell phone policy. 3, BHS uniform policy. 4, BHS attendance policy. 5, other business. 6, adjournment. I have one other item to read. This meeting will be held and will be accessible to the public via Brockton Community Access, Brockton Public Schools website, www.bpsma.org, YouTube and Comcast Channel 8, and 107 HD version. The public can access this meeting via the link youtube.com/TheBrocktonChannels. I'm going to do a roll call. Start with Judy Sullivan. Jared Homer.
Here.
Cynthia Rivas Mendez.
Here.
Tony Rodriguez.
Here.
Joyce Azak.
Here.
And I'm Tim Sullivan. I am here. Item 2, the BHS cell phone policy. Mr. Thomas, you want to fill us in on that?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Sullivan. So the updated draft policy after our first community forum about a month ago, and several opportunities for students, staff, families to continue with the survey that has been open online. We appreciate everybody's feedback that was provided. Very meaningful feedback from staff, parents, students, and I said this at the forum, both of them. It was exciting to see the participation that we had, the number of people that we had. I know it's a hot topic, but it's something that we had really good discussion about. People are passionate about, and you know, it was really good to get people's feedback and to see the enthusiasm people showed for the policy amendments that we may make. So some highlights from the updated draft. So we are continuing to say that cell phones should not be used during the school day, that students can keep the cell phone on them. They need to be away and out of sight, unless they're directed by a teacher to use them for a lesson or educational purposes. We also obviously would allow students access to their cell phones if it's tied to a disability or their IEP, and other related matters that a student would have written into an educational plan. The way we would, and there would be no headphones or earbuds allowed in the hallways at any point, which has become a safety issue where students can't hear direction by listening to music walking through the halls. When something happens and the halls are crowded, we want to make sure students can hear any direction, any announcements, any emergency announcements, teacher direction, to make sure everybody's kept safe. So that is something that's in the policy, so no earbuds or headphones. These devices should be stored away. And then, as you can see, the violations would be referral to the Associate Principal of Climate and Culture. First violation would be written warning and call and conversation with the parent. Second violation would be a meeting with the parent and the student to discuss the issues with the cell phone, and why it is obviously keeping the student away from instruction and away from learning. And then the third violation, the student would be issued the yonder pouch, where their phone would need to be kept in there when they entered the building each day, until further notice, until we can be assured that the student is going to comply with the policy. And again, also students are prohibited from planning inappropriate behavior, planning fights, making videos that are inappropriate, photographing people or videotaping them without their knowledge. Those kind of violations would be an automatic cell phone being placed in the pouch and loss of that privilege. So again, the Brockton High School, as always, is not responsible for loss of stolen cell phones or any other electronic device. That is, that remains in the policy, and the sale or purchase of cell phones throughout the building is not permitted on school grounds. Again, this was a revised draft from our first one that we sent out, that every student would put their phone in a yonder bag as they entered the building. And then after the feedback from the parents and students and staff, this has been the revised policy. So we can talk about it and answer any questions, obviously, that anybody may have.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Thomas on the cell phone policy?
I have to say that I think the community forums were very successful, both of them. The turnout was amazing, so I think that was great to see how the community members, students, families had input in the decision-making. That needs, obviously, I know that's part of our role as school committee, but I would love to see that more and more, because as Mr. Thomas said, Mike, this was very much revised because of the consistent feedback that we had. And I think, it just shows how important that feedback is.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
I would make one recommendation. After speaking with some more people and some staff, I think might be beneficial to put in the policy a disclaimer at the bottom saying that the school committee, the superintendent and the school committee reserve the right to review this policy as the year goes by, because if we find that the cell phones are continuing to be a problem, and I think 100% we want to respect students, their opinions. We want to make sure we give them the opportunities as young adults. And I think that this policy revision has shown that. But I think if we go through the year and there's instances of just blatant cell phone use that is widespread, or things are, improper, inappropriate things are being posted, or fighting's taking place and they're being planned through cell phones, I think the committee should reserve the right to have a conversation of, putting a full policy in place of yonder bags, but I think whether that needs to be in the language or not, because I think the committee always has the right to review policies, so that might not even have to go in. That's just my suggestion.
We need a motion from somebody.
Mr. Sullivan.
Ms. Azak.
Thank you, Superintendent. So with the revision, I got a more positive feedback from a lot of parents. So for those that don't remember, I want to say probably about 6 years ago, we talked about the no cell phone policy. Because I remember Mr. Minicello, Mr. D'Agostino, and myself, and a few others were on the committee, and we left it the way it was as far as the cell phones, where I'm not sure about the rest of the committee, but I've had a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, whether they're educators, staff, parents. It's just the cell phones are an issue, and let's give it a chance. Change is very difficult. We understand, but we have to give it a chance. We're only helping the students. That way they can focus in the classrooms, and it might help a little with some of the things that are happening outside of the classrooms. So I just wanted to share that I know I've received a lot of positive feedback with the second draft of the policy as far as the cell phones. The only thing is a lot of them are saying, 2-3 chances. Okay, the first chance we get it, you go to the principal. The second, the student and the parent meet. It just, like we've discussed, a lot of buildings are doing different things. We have to be uniform. All the buildings, if we're going to enforce it, it's got to be enforced with everybody. That way everyone feels like they're getting a fair chance. Not, so-and-so's getting away with it.
Yeah,
It has to be consistent.
throughout the whole school.
Definitely. So I just wanted to share that. Those are, my feedback from constituents has been different from the first form that we had. So I definitely want to share that.
Tony Rodriguez?
Thank you. I know this is, BHS, but wouldn't it be prudent that this be a district-wide policy up into including our middle schools? Because we do have,
We could make that, we could
Those-
change it, make it district-wide and put it in all the handbooks, correct?
all right, thank you.
Yep. And the-
Any other questions or comments? We need a motion from somebody?
Motion to accept the Brockton High School electronic device policy?
And a
Second.
second? A motion has been made by Judy Sullivan, seconded by Tony Rodriguez. Do you want to read up that motion, Judy?
Do I want to say it again?
Yeah, what the motion was.
The motion is for the Brockton High School electronic devices policy.
To be
Read the whole
approved.
page. Read the whole page.
No,
No, just the approval.
just what's approved.
What's approved is cell phones and electronic communication devices may be used during school hours for educational purposes only, with prior approval from a supervising teacher staff member.
Perfect. And that motion has been made and seconded properly. I'll do a roll call. Judy Sullivan,
Yes.
Jared Homer,
Yes.
Cynthia Rivas Mendez,
Yes.
Tony Rodriguez,
Yes.
Joyce Azak,
Yes.
Tim Sullivan is a yes. That motion is carried unanimous. Item 3, BHS uniform policy. Mr. Thomas?
So, I just want to correct it's actually the dress code policy. As was revised as well after the forum and the feedback we received. And obviously, we want to make sure students have the right for self-expression, and that's important. But we also have to maintain a school atmosphere that's appropriate as we are preparing students to go into the work world in college. We want to make sure what we wear in school is appropriate, and that's all of us. So, and we want to make sure whatever is worn does not interrupt the educational process, and it's also not offensive or endangers anybody's health and safety of the entire building. So there are some bullets I'll go over that are here in the new one. So basically, wearing any apparel or head covering which will inhibit staff members or emergency responders' ability to quickly identify the person. It includes but not limited to hats, hoods, or bandanas. Exceptions will be provided by the Associate Principal of Culture and Climate for documented religious or medical reasons or identified disabilities. There could be exceptions made. Again, anything that could identify a student as being a member of a gang. That could be articles, symbols, or anything to do with identifying students as gang members is also here. Any item that encourages the use of alcohol, tobacco, or illegal drugs, or illegal violent activity, that is not allowed to be worn. Any item which references sexually provocative or explicit content is not allowed. Any item that causes disorder or disruption of the school or creates hostile environment for others at the school. Any jewelry or accessories that could cause injuries. I know this one has been a hot topic that we've been talking about. Hooded coats, jackets, or hoodies, unless a modification is offered by the principal or their designee due to extreme circumstances, which is weather, or such as medical or religious reasons or extreme weather conditions. These items must be kept in the student's locker when there's no modification made by the administration. Clothing should provide appropriate body coverage with bareback, midriff, low-cut shirt, shorts, pants, rips above the knees are not permitted. In addition, attire that reveals undergarments or garments that are not made of see-through material, mesh, sheer fabrics without a blouse shirt underneath are not allowed. Clothing must cover undergarments when sitting, standing, or bending. These are expected to be followed in respect to wearing any appropriate attire. Again, this is something that is the revisions that we made, and I know that to point out the biggest one has been the hooded sweatshirts, which, as you know, is a very popular item for staff, not only staff, students and the public that wear nowadays. So, but we have had issues, and I've been clear that there have been issues with students covering themselves and not wanting to be identified if something happens, putting on a hood, running away so the cameras don't pick them up. Or students, again, that unfortunately there are 65 doors, exterior doors at Brockton High School. There's not 65 staff members that we have that can stand at every door. So, you know, you also worry about people letting outsiders into the building, which is always a concern. Even though the cameras are on every exterior door, by the time somebody recognizes that, if somebody does come in and they can cover themselves with a hood. Not that this policy would stop somebody coming in with a hood, but it does make it clear that, you know, if you do see somebody with a hood, it means they're not supposed to be here. So that's, again, and I understand this is a hot topic, but again, you know, we have heard over and over again from students, parents, and staff about people not wanting to come, students not wanting to come to Brockton High or wanting to leave Brockton High because of safety. And we have to make the best judgment and decision to maintain safety. And sometimes that's making tough decisions, and people are not going to be happy with everything. But we have heard it loud and clear. And I know I've heard a lot of complaints about the hoods, but the complaints about safety outnumbers those 20-1. So I just want to go back to be clear about why we have decided to talk about these policies, because our enrollment has dropped from 4,500 to 3,500, and what we continue to hear in the lower grades, now down to 5th grade, is that, you know, we need to figure out what to do for high school because we don't want our child going to Brockton High. So, and it's all about the safety. So I just wanted people to remember why we have visited these policies, and it's all about safety and keeping people safe that makes the environment. And this is not the only thing that makes schools safe is policies. There's culture, there's climate, there's relationships, there's how we support each other and support students. But these are some things that have been put in place and talked about because we have heard over and over again about the concern of the safety at Brockton High School. So that's it from my presentation, and I'm happy, obviously.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Thomas?
I have a question.
Judy Sullivan?
So Superintendent, do you know other high schools, what do they do about the hoodies? Do you have any
Well,
info on that?
it goes, I know that Lawrence, Springfield, they have full uniform policies system-wide, and they do not allow hoodies. We visited one of those schools, Springfield Central, that did not allow hoodies, and everybody had to wear at least black khakis. You know, they had a uniform policy, which we started with, and kind of, again, we listened to people and went away from it. And, you know, to allow more self-expression, I think it's something that, as we get into the school year, we should revisit and look at, maybe take a visit to Lawrence and see, because they do it, you know, K to 12. So there are a few school districts that do not allow hoodies and follow a more strict uniform policy than this one. And there's others that don't, that others that just say you can wear a hooded sweatshirt and just make sure it's not over your head. You can't keep it over your head. You know, you can't have your hood on. And that's been our policy. Like, we have allowed hooded sweatshirts in the old policy. It's basically, but you can't be covering your identity with the, your hood needs to be off.
Right, and since safety was brought up at the parent forums, then I think that's good that we're saying that, you know, it's going to be more safe this way. We've had problems the other way where kids are covering up. So I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. So from my understanding, we're saying no hoods at all.
That
Because
would
what
be,
you
that's
just
what's in
said,
this policy here.
okay.
Correct.
Because what you just said is that some allow it, but they just can't put the hood on.
Yeah, so our current policy, if
Yeah.
there was no change, the current policy says you obviously can have hooded sweatshirts, but your hood can't be up. You could,
Okay.
and again, unless there's, again, a medical reason or a disability that requires that, but that's what is in our current policy, and I think most policies across the state have those. There are, like what I have found, Springfield Central, I think all the Springfield high schools, and also Lawrence, it could be Lowell as well, that have strict uniform policies that do not allow hooded anything.
Okay, so if
Yep.
if, let's say we were to accept hoods, but they can't have it on at all, like in classes and hallways, similar to like the dress code proposal that some students sent, is that like, is this, why would that still be looked as maybe a safety reason?
It would depend on how we, again, it would have to be enforced, and parents, we would really have to make sure everybody's on board, parents especially, that, you know, if it continues to be a problem where a student wears a hooded sweatshirt and they continue to put it up, there's got to be consequences, because there's no meeting or accountability if it's not, again, what Ms. Azak said before, it's got to be consistent across all buildings, and we have to have a clear message that we have to hold people accountable if a student continues, and it's this, a repeat offender that continues to try to put the hood up and not take it off and not listen to direction, then it's going to have to be some very difficult conversations with parents about consequences that, we're trying to be very reasonable and work with students and parents, but we have to make sure that if we do allow hoods and we go down the path of, okay, they can't be up, we're going to have, we have to make sure we hold ourselves accountable to address it if a student continues to put their hood on.
So if,
But I understand what you're saying.
so if we go by what this is saying that no hoods at all. So is this trying to set a tone, like no hoods at all, no chances, like we're gonna see how it goes? And then maybe we'll add hoods later on, depending how this policy goes? Or like, are we just thinking
You
no
would-
hoods at all, not
If you
even-
wanted any modification, you would have to go like we did with cell phones, basically, okay, you allow hoods, but it becomes a problem, then we revisit it and now they're gone.
Yeah,
That you could go that way as well.
but it sounds like as a committee, we feel like as of now, we don't want to no hoods to set the tone. That's like a whole
That's
committee question.
something that's, yep, and then you would have the discretion to, obviously, you always have the discretion. The school committee has full control over the handbooks, over the policy, so you would have full discretion to bring that back at any time and say, we really would want to
So,
revisit. You
my
could do
whole
it either
thing-
way.
Okay. My whole thing on this dress code, though, that I have said before, and I know like there's two sides of every argument, is if we're gonna hold, specifically here, because it says, students are expected to follow staff directions, and then it says, school administrators are authorized to take action in instances where students' attire does not meet the stated requirements. So if we're gonna hold students accountable, are we also holding teachers accountable? Now, I know we say yes, but we also have to know teachers have a contract, right? When I say teachers, I mean educators, everybody, right, across the spectrum. And because educators, we trust that their professionalism they're bringing in the building, but from my understanding, what I continuously hear from students, parents, community members, is that that hasn't been the case. So if we're gonna hold students to this standard, how are we going to be able to hold when it gets a little tricky, especially with union getting involved, contract, et cetera? Because we haven't really talked about if we're gonna go collective bargaining with the union about this. Also, that would just target just the teachers. Are we thinking about the whole spectrum and all educators?
That would be the committee's discretion to basically, because you have your subcommittees for each union that we would approach. We would have our attorney send a letter into impact bargain over dress code for employees. And that you'd have to obviously do that with each. You have obviously clear dress codes for our school police. You have a clear uniform policy for custodians, food service workers. But the ones that don't have that in the contract, you would have to approach them with a, Attorney Spatafor would have to send a letter that we'd like to impact bargain over that.
And then that would include probably then not wearing hoodies. So like,
That would
I know.
include whatever you wanted to bring up as a possible policy to negotiate with them, yes.
Okay, because the other wonder that I have as a committee is, I know as a high school teacher, we used to do hoodies for like the seniors, the uprising seniors, or like fundraising and things like that. So that sounds like that's not even a possibility for them to do if we're gonna put this in the policy.
Yeah, I mean, to be
No hoodies at all.
perfectly, we have a ton of hoodies we sell in the school store.
Exactly.
We have a ton of hoodies. We reward kids at the end of a season with hooded sweatshirts for either the band, a chorus, a drama, or sports. We award the middle school football team with championship hoodies. So hoodies are obviously very popular. I mean, in the wintertime, and I'm out of work, I wear them all the time. I mean, that's just what it's the style now. So again, we have to decide whether, like we did with the cell phone, do we allow them and see how it goes with the no hood on policy, or do we start with no hoods at all and then try to backtrack? It's something we have to, or you have to decide on. But I hear what you're saying.
Any other
Because people
questions or
did make some
comments?
good points last night.
Oh.
Ms. Azak?
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. So Mrs. Rivas Mendez actually asked a couple of mine. So one question is are we going to have enough lockers?
Yes, we do.
We have enough lockers.
Yep.
The other question is, and I know this has come up before over the years, when you have a student in a different part of the building, at the end of the day, they need to get back to their locker. And I know in the past we had talked about the adjustment counselors would, it depends on their schedule. They can tell if the student, say for example, is in the fine arts, and they need to get to the yellow building or any other building to get to their locker and then head back to grab their bus outside. So just so the parents know, our adjustment counselors will let them leave at least a couple of minutes early to be able to get to their lockers.
Well, that would be discretion of pretty much, well, some students get to leave class early if they have a medical reason or reasons that are in their IEP, but it's also discretion of the principal to say, and it happens for years when I was in school and then when I worked here under Dr. Zakowitz, that, you'd judge it, and if you had to dismiss 2 minutes early from the last period so students can get to their lockers, especially in the middle of the winter time, to get their coats, then, you obviously would make exceptions because it's, you got to use common sense.
Well, that's it. Just because I know some parents have asked, and I said, whether they're in the gym and they need to get to one of their buildings or the fine arts, it would be something that they can address with the adjustment counselor, and it would it'd be on a one-on-one basis. I mean, they have to have a good reason, depending where you are the last period.
Right, and it's good leadership. So when you're an administrator in the building, you get the tone and the feel and the atmosphere of and you see students struggling to get to their locker. I mean, I remember the days we had to take swimming, and then you had to dry off, get dressed, and then you had to go all the way to the green from the gym for your next class, and you would freak out because I'm like, okay, I was just in a pool, and I got 5 minutes to get out of the pool and dry off and get to the next class. Those are the kind of things you, as a good leader, becomes aware of the building atmosphere and our kids getting frustrated because they're missing their bus because they're not being able to get to the lockers. We also have to look at the buses. Do they have to leave as early? I know we're very, I think now with our own bus transportation department, I think we have a little bit more leeway. I mean, I remember the days when First Student was running. I mean, if they would be leaving, kids would still be walking out, and they had all the buses leaving. And it's like, now that we have full control over that, I mean, I can clearly say, listen, the buses are leaving too early. They need to stay for another 3 to 4 minutes. They'll get to I know it's difficult to get around the city now. I know it's not easy. It takes a long time, but do the buses have to leave as early as they do to give kids more time? So you're not, the last thing you want to do is cut an English class early, but now that we own our own buses, the buses should be able to stay put for maybe another 5 minutes so kids can get to their lockers. So those are things we have to look at. So you're right, that is a concern and you don't want to put undue stress on kids flying around the building to get their coat. But as a leader, you got to make sure that you know the feel of your building, and if you see students that frustrated, then you basically tell our own transportation department the buses have to stay another 3 minutes, because my kids need to get to those buses.
No, definitely. I mean, they have enough stress already, so that's
Right.
one less thing they need to be
And
worrying about.
that's the good thing about us being in full control of our transportation department, because we do have that discretion to say, the buses are leaving too early, you know, I need them to stay for an extra 3 minutes to allow students, or 4 minutes, so they can get to their lockers. And it's just common sense leadership.
And couple of other questions, I'll make
Sure.
it quick. So I know when they come into the high school, they scan their IDs.
They go through the metal detectors.
They go
and
through the metal
scan it.
detector. So obviously they can wear their hoodie to school, take it
course.
off, put it in their bag.
Yes.
It's with them. Is there any way for like repeat violating, I guess, the policy? Is there a way we can have an alert when they scan? If we decide tonight that they let them wear the hoodies and just no hoodies on, and you know everyone's going to have to work together.
Right, it would
You know,
have
that
to-
just-
it would
everyone's
have
gonna
to-
Is there a way that it would just alert, like, you know, there's issues? Because when they're coming into the school, you have staffs there as they're scanning to come into the schools.
Yeah, I think I'd have to look at Infinite Campus closer. We can flag things on Infinite Campus that come up. I don't know if it will tell you right away when they scan in.
Okay.
We'd have to ask Sean Precious to look more into that. I know that we can manually put flags, you know, notices in that the student, you know, about, you know, when there's a custody battle, and there's notes that you put in saying, you know, certain things to protect the child, or if they have an IEP that comes up, or a medical condition so there's obviously different flags you put out. The only thing I can't answer for you is whether when they scan through, if any of that comes up.
Some kind of alert.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because I wondered about that, because, again, I've talked to a lot of staff, because it's a really tough decision. You know, and financially, yes, there are students that don't have other clothes. So tonight's not an easy decision, but for security reasons, everyone was saying the same thing. It's hard to identify a student when they have a hood on. On cameras, if there's an incident, something happens, when they have the hoods, it's hard to identify. And, you know, we're here to, safety first. We're here to keep the students and the staff safe. So that was the only question I had, is just financial. That's the only, it could be a financial burden for some families, and I know it's going to be a financial burden for some families. But that was it. And I think Mrs. Rivas-Mendez covered, and it was, in the other question I'm getting is staff with the cell phones and the dress code. So, and that's something we would have to
Impact
check,
parking,
yes.
yep.
Because if we have to lead by example.
Mr. Rodriguez, you had a question?
It's more of a comment. I mean, you know, we have to make sure that the school is safe, number one, but also make it fun. And that's going to be up to the administration here. Mike's going to be up here. No hats, no hoodies, but it's not to say that we're going to have a hat day. It's going to be a fundraiser. Kids are going to wear hats. It could be a hoodie day, you know, so I'm pretty sure the superintendent, interim principal, is going to be able to make it a fun environment. So I support this 100%, and we can get this off the table.
Mr. Rodriguez, would you like to make the motion?
Oh, you got more questions, Mr. Sullivan?
It's hard to see with the lights.
I know
Gary.
it's the bright lights.
Thank you. I was just going to make the comment too. I mean, I know from some of the student comments, they talked about self-expression being a big issue. We did talk about the school logos and the things that we do print that are on hoodies already. In my own experience working in schools, I mean, where we allow the students to wear hooded sweatshirts, the policy is they can't have their hood up in the hallway. It does create confrontation where you have to stop kids. You have to, if you're going to combat the problem of not being able to identify kids, you do have to see it through to the end. I think the issue just becomes what is the end result of that interaction with the student. So I would say if we decide not to adopt this policy with this prohibition on the hoodies, and continue with our current policy that allows kids to wear hooded sweatshirts and things without the hood over their head. I don't know if that means that the policy committee would have to look at what the policy states in terms of what are the repercussions for those repeat violators who continue to hide their identity. That becomes more of that sounds like that's a discipline issue. It's a conduct issue of like intentionally hiding yourself under your hood and violating a dress code policy. I would just say I support the students' request to be allowed to express themselves, to wear their clothing that, you know, a hooded sweatshirt which would cover them, you know, according to the last piece, you know, appropriate body coverage, with the exception of, you know, it teaches the kids a little bit of self-responsibility too. You know, you wouldn't expect to go into a bank and have a bank teller wearing a hood over their face, not being able to interact with them. You wouldn't want to probably have that interaction at a grocery store, interacting with somebody or anyone in customer service who's hiding their identity. If you walked into a bank and the person was wearing a bank teller logo or something like that and had a hood on, I probably wouldn't even notice it. But I would just say too, there's something to be said for, you know, the kids' concerns about climate, you know, across the schools, in our buildings, and the fluctuation and temperature changes from one part of the building to the next. I understand where the kids' comments come from. I would say that, knowing that we do have a policy that's in place that allows it, it's just a matter of we may need to consider what the repercussions are for the repeat violations and how do we address that in a positive way or in a way that brings attention to that safety concern that everyone was talking about before, too. Explaining that to the kids, why and what's appropriate, when is it an appropriate time to have a hood on, and when is it not, and kind of, again, teaching the kids about social responsibility. What is an appropriate social interaction out in the public? Who would you expect to see wearing a hood and interact with, and who would you not? You know? So thank you.
I want to make one last comment.
Yeah, Cynthia, go
So
ahead.
I want to make it clear, like, I understand the safety policy of the hoodie, but I also understand that 3 years ago, kids were behind a screen. So when they were coming into the building, right, that's a defense mechanism to cover yourself because you were behind a screen. So we talk a lot about social emotional learning, but then when we actually see it in effect and how it impacts our kids, you know, I get it's a safety concern, but we think about what has occurred, right? Fights that has occurred where it's like, I pull a person with the hoodie, right? That's an easy access. I get all that. But I think we have to entrust our kids. It's 3 years right after COVID. So I do agree where when you go to the bank, you have the option to wear a hoodie. Now, how do you behave with the hoodie? I still think we have to teach our kids. We forget that just 3 years ago, they were stuck at home behind a screen. 1 year later, they're still stuck. Another year later, we're hybrid. We're having these conversations as if the kids just came in and they can just jump back into normal. And that's the problem with society. Because I get it. As a teacher, it was really hard to be in the hallways. I did hallway duty, having a kid with a hoodie, with a mask, not being able to recognize them, having the race issue of calling a black student a different name when that's not their name. I get all that. But we also have to be considerate that was just 3 years ago. And think about it, 180 days of a school year, that's not even full 3 years. So I think we should entrust our students where we give them the option and yes, have some fine print or whatever we need to add, that if you guys can't go by this, that, then yes, we're going to revisit this and we're going to be more firm and set the tone where there's no policy. But I think we have to entrust our kids because we're talking probably about 3, 4, 5 students that needed that extra support that didn't get it. And because of those, 3, 4, I'm saying obviously it's more, but I'm saying it wasn't the 100%. It was maybe 20% or 15%, and out of those 20, 15%, they're ruining it for the other kids. So that's my argument on that, where I think we have to entrust them in it, but we have to teach them, right? So when you put this policy out, what Mr. Homer said, okay, why don't we wear the hoodie? What are places where it's respectable to a hoodie? Where it's not? Why is it important for you not? And emphasize the safety, because kids are really screaming that they want more safety. So I get all that. But I just wanted to put that perspective out there because I think we forget that we were just in COVID not even 3 years ago, and that kids were behind a screen.
I just want to tell you what happened to me, not yesterday, the day before. I was going to the bank, a drive-up window. I had my sunglasses on, and I was asked to take them off.
There you go. But you have the option to wear the sunglasses.
But I had to take them off, or I couldn't have made the deposit. if I didn't take them off. I'm not kidding.
Usually they do that if you're making a withdrawal, not a deposit.
Mr. Rodriguez, you wanted to make a motion?
No, actually,
No, they have still more talk.
so, just so the committee knows, under Policy Revision and Review, BGC, it states the committee will evaluate how the policies have been executed by the school staff and will weigh the results. It will rely on the school, staff, students, and the community for providing evidence of the effect of the policies it has adopted. So it is our policy. If we don't see something's working, we just come back to policy and we make
Change
our
it.
revisions. It is, we do have the revision, so we don't, it's nothing special. It is part of our policy to do this.
And just so you know, this is, the superintendent is asking for this policy.
Well, again, I'm asking for it, but I hear the points that are being made, that, you know, there are, you know, when you're coming into a school that, you know, basically, and you're coming off of COVID, and there's obviously been very difficult for kids to return from COVID along with staff. But we have to figure out the culture and climate we want in the school. Ms. Rivas Mendez makes a really good point that, you know, how do we give students as young adults the opportunity to do the right thing? And that's something that, you know, has to be seriously taken into consideration. Because I know how people love to wear hoodies, and it's going to be incumbent upon me and the administration to make sure if a student continues, if we go with hoodies again, if they continue to wear it, and if it becomes a really widespread problem where you have to look at data and you say, you know, it's really, we got a lot of kids that just are not complying with it, and then you revisit and say, I'm sorry, we tried, we met, we talked, we had assemblies, we had discussions in classrooms, and it just is now, you know, this many students violating, and that's something we have to revisit. But, you know, it's about looking at data and making sure. So I understand fully that, you know, we want kids to, like Mr. Rodriguez said, you want school to be a fun, happy place, and you want students to buy into an atmosphere and an environment that's safe and supportive, but makes them feel, you know, that they're able to express themselves. And, you know, so I understand fully what the point is. And again, I go back and forth on this one because I do want to keep the school safe. And, you know, if there are 100 to 200 students violating it, do we punish all students for it? But I think that's something we need to decide, whether we see how things go in September with the current policy, or it's something I go back and forth on. I'm not.
I just wanted to say, I'm sure if it doesn't work in September, when we come back, we'll just change it. Only because we're running out of time. We're not even through this yet. It was supposed to be a half-an-hour meeting.
Make
We need a
motion.
motion in a second.
Motion to adopt the Brockton High School dress code. Our dress code seeks to balance our students' self-expression and individualism with the need to maintain a safe and welcome learning environment for all, as drafted, that's presented in front of each member this evening.
We need a second. A motion has been made by Tony Rodriguez, properly seconded by Judy Sullivan. I'll do a roll call. Judy Sullivan,
Yes.
Jared Homer,
No.
Cynthia Rivas Mendez.
No, I do think, just on the record, I do think a policy is very important. I think we should entrust them with the hoodies and then revisit. And also what I mentioned earlier, we need to hold our educators to the same expectations.
Okay, Tony Rodriguez,
Yes.
Joyce Azak,
I was a yes, but I'm going to be a no, as long as we can give the students an opportunity to follow the no hoodie policy. No hood on.
Yep.
So give them a chance. We heard their voices, so I'm a no, and we may need to revisit this.
Tim Sullivan is a yes. What does that come out to?
So basically, what you can do is, it's tie, you can move to accept the policy minus the hood. bullet, and then we have to revisit that we have to schedule a policy subcommittee meeting before school starts to vet this out. But you can vote to accept the new dress code policy, basically putting on hold the hooded section. I mean, I think that's the
Tony, do you
best
wanna-
thing to do at a tie.
Revisit your motion?
No, because we can't revisit the motion, it was voted on. So somebody would have to make a new motion.
So, question,
Yes, Joyce.
could we make a motion to accept certain items in
Could
the
accept-
policy and then revisit the hoodie by, say, October? Put that in there, then we'll have a few weeks of school. If the students are listening and there's no hoods, there's no issues. Otherwise, if there are issues, we'll definitely have to revisit under our policy. BCG, I think it was, or GC.
That's
Can we
up to
do
you
it
to
that
make-
way? That way, we don't have to hold anything up for September, and then we'll give the students an opportunity.
Okay, you need to make a motion on that, Joyce?
So, motion to approve the Brockton High School dress code policy, as stated, but removing the hoodie policy, the hoodie item in here, and putting a revisit date of sometime in October. We'll get an update from the superintendent / principal, how things are going,
Okay,
and it will be an ongoing thing. I mean, if.
Yeah, and I also would make sure that in that bullet, that in that bullet, that all we're talking about is hoodies, but we want to be clear that jackets and coats
Yes.
that's staying in, that they need to go into lockers.
Yes.
But
we need a second on that motion.
Second.
A motion has been made by School Committee Member Joyce Azak, seconded by School Committee Member Jared Homer.
discussion?
On the motion,
Any discussion on the motion?
a hoodie is considered a hat. So you have to make sure that that's actually laid out clearly.
Right.
So,
So right now, we're only,
a
so,
hood is considered a hat.
We would strike that language, right? Is that correct? We would remove that part. It would just mention coats and jackets must be kept in lockers.
correct.
We keep all the other, the first 6 and the 8th bullet the way they are. We would talk about striking the part about hoodies from that 7th bullet point.
Yeah.
I don't even, do we need to have language in a new policy that we're proposing that talks about revisiting? I think we just revisit it as a committee. We could just
Correct.
revisit it later. I don't even think we have to add anything.
Yeah, because you
about-
have that full,
Yeah, we don't need to add anything about a date or anything. I don't think. I would support removing the part about the hoodies in item 7.
Any other discussion on the motion? A roll call, Judy Sullivan? Roll call, Jared Homer?
Yes.
Roll call, Cynthia Rivas Mendez?
Yes, but on the record, we hold educators to the same expectation.
Correct. Roll call, Tony Rodriguez?
I'm a no.
Roll call, Joyce Azak?
Yes.
And Tim Sullivan is a yes. Motion Judy Sullivan?
so it's 4-2?
Is it 4-2? Motion passes 4-2. Item 4, BHS attendance policy.
Yeah, so the attendance policy has been changed, where we used to have students would fail on the 4th unexcused absence of each term. This changes to, a few major changes is that this would move to a semester, which makes it a lot easier for students and teachers. And basically, students would not exceed 7 unexcused absences. And then there's excused absences, you can see. This also would allow, within the first 5 days, parents could write a letter to get the absence excused. What I want to make clear about absences, like, we can waive absences. That does not mean the absence didn't happen. So legally, the student's absent from school, they stay absent from school because that's what legally has to be reported to the state. Administration can waive an absent, meaning that it's excused, but what parents and students understand that you were still absent on whatever day you were absent on. That does not excuse that doesn't take the absence away, because legally it has to be in as being absent. So we would basically remove the case where we were failing students if they had 4 unexcused absences in a term, no matter what grade the student had. If they had an 85 average or a 90 average, if they exceeded the unexcused absences and hit that 4th in a term, they would fail automatically. That policy has not worked, and it's actually, in my opinion, has made more students miss school and not come to school, because when they end up failing, especially if they fail one term and then a second term, then a lot of them will say, well, what's the use? So I think we need to get to more of a common sense policy that we set clear expectations. That is a requirement for students to come to school. It's required by the Department of Education. They require 94% attendance. Is it 94 or 93? I think it's 94%. It could be 93, but the Department of Education, you are considered chronically absent if you don't come to school at least 93% of the days. So there has to be a policy that coincides with the Department of Education policy. And there's also the law for students that are under 16 that we have to follow as well, that they have to come to school. But this policy takes away the automatic failure, puts more conversation with the guidance counselor, the adjustment counselor, and administration to have with the parents and the student of why is the student not coming to school? Why are they absent so much? And, if it's not medical, we have to figure out, get to the root of the problem, why the student's not coming to school, and continuing to fail them because they don't, it's just not working. And if a student is not coming to school, this does not include class cutting. That is not excused absent, and if you continue to cut classes, you will fail. But this is just students that just don't come to school for a variety of reasons, which could be several things. So this just changes the policy of just that hard, you fail if you've been absent so many times, and it's basically more of a conversation with parents, guidance counselors, and adjustment counselors that, why are you not coming to school, and how can we help you to make sure you do come? And if students are doing their work and the teacher they have a high enough grade to pass, then the teacher should be allowed to pass them, and not just fail them because they've been absent too many times. So that's the biggest change.
Any questions or discussion on the attendance policy? Hearing none, we need a motion from somebody.
Motion to accept the attendance policy?
Second.
A motion has been made by Judy Sullivan, seconded by Joyce Azak. The motion is to accept the attendance policy as presented tonight. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. Roll call. Judy Sullivan.
Yes.
Jared Homer.
Yes.
Cynthia Rivas Mendez.
Yes.
Tony Rodriguez.
Yes.
Joyce Azak.
Yes.
Tim Sullivan is a yes. Motion carries unanimous. We've gone way over on it was only supposed to be a half hour
We'll have to
meeting.
address that when we open the next meeting. We'll have to move it.
It's item 5. Any other business to come before this subcommittee? Hearing none. I need a motion on item 6, the adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion has been made and properly seconded. Just by a show of hands, all in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Good evening. This is the Policy Subcommittee meeting held at the George M. Romm Little Theater at Brockton High School. Superintendent's contract meeting, sorry. And it's at 470 Forest Ave, Brockton, Mass. It's Tuesday, August 15, 2023. It's 6 o'clock now. Just doing a roll call for attendance, and I'm gonna, once we get the roll call that everybody's here, we're gonna postpone the meeting to a later date to get on with the regular school committee. The roll call, Judy Sullivan, Jared Homer,
Here.
Cynthia Rivas Mendez,
Here.
Tony Rodriguez,
Yeah.
Joyce Azak,
Here.
Tim Sullivan is here. Now we're gonna need a meeting to, a motion to adjourn from somebody.
A motion to adjourn the superintendent's contract subcommittee meeting to a later date, postponed to a later date.
In a second. A motion has been made by Joyce Azak, seconded by Judy Sullivan, just by a show of hands, and is to adjourn the meeting to a later date. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
I hereby call the Brockton School Committee meeting to order, it being Tuesday, August 15th, 2023, 6 p.m. I respectfully ask you to please stand and salute our American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good evening, everybody. We have a pretty lengthy agenda tonight. I need to establish a quorum. Mr. Sullivan? Mr. Homer?
Here.
Mrs. Cynthia Rivas Mendez?
Here.
Mr. Tony Rodriguez? Joyce, Ms. Azak?
Here.
Mr. Sullivan? Chair is here as well. We have established a quorum. Just need to read the following into the record. Dear visitors, welcome to a meeting of the Brockton School Committee. This is the agenda that we discussed this evening. Please note that the hearing of visitors is included. If you have a statement or question, please give your name to the secretary. In addition to attending, the public can view this meeting via television on Comcast Channel 8 and also 1071 HD version, and online via the following link, www.youtube.com/TheBrocktonChannels. Mrs. Campbell has put the hearing of visitors out. No one has signed in, so we have no hearing of visitors this evening. We do have, again, agenda item 3, which is executive session, and I'll read the matters into the record, and then we will establish a quorum. We will be coming back into session after executive session. Executive session, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. And also Mass General Law, Chapter 38, 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions of contract negotiations with non-union personnel. I need to have a motion to go into executive session.
Motion to go into executive session?
Second.
Motion on the floor by Ms. Azak, properly seconded by Mr. Sullivan. We'll do a roll call vote relative to those motions on the floor. Mrs. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Homer?
Yes.
Mrs. Rivas Mendez?
Yes.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Yes.
Ms. Azak?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yes.
And the chair also says yes. We will be going into executive session, but for those watching and those here, we will be coming back into public session. I hereby bring the Brockton School Committee back into order, it being Tuesday, August 15th, 2023. We are on agenda item number 4. I have to ask the members of the school committee, we already went through items 1, 2, and 3. Number 2 was hearing of visitors. It's my understanding some hearing of visitors folks are here. They're saying that they weren't able to get into the building, so thus they weren't able to sign it up in time. What's the will of the committee relative to, could you show of hands how many people wanted to speak? There's only one individual. There's only one individual. Again, as the chair, I think it's absolutely fine that that person can
I
speak.
make a motion that we should be able to
We
hear
can go
the-
back to agenda 2, hearing of visitors.
That we go back to agenda
Is there a
2.
second on that, please?
Second.
Second. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, we'll go back to hearing of visitors number 2. With that being said, we just have to do the process that we always do, and sign in. Mrs. Campbell, is the sheet still over there? Okay. I can put it on. You just have to sign in, okay? Thank you. Yeah. If there are any other individuals here in the Little Theater that wanted to sign in, again, just to remind everybody, hearing of visitors is limited to 3 minutes in scope, and we do have to adhere to that. We have a pretty lengthy agenda tonight, but I do want to thank the members of the school committee to allow us to go back to accommodate.
Are we waiting?
No, yeah, we just waiting for you. Was there anybody else that wanted to sign in tonight? That's fine, that's perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, your time is now. Thank you, thank you. No, thank you for joining us tonight as well.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Shayna Gilliard. I own a childcare drop-in center at the Westgate Mall. I've been in the Brockton community for about 2 to 3 years. I came during the pandemic. We first opened as a remote learning program during the pandemic, so people who still had to work could bring their students to us and go to work, and we would supervise them in the school. Since then, I had to get a different kind of license, and that put me with the younger population. What I learned from that is that there's a large autism population. I like that the Huntington School will be coming now to the Westgate Mall. There is resources and everything for them. The other thing that I learned at the other meeting we just had on Center Street, from talking to parents and families, we learned that we wanted civic engagement and more family engagement from the students and the parents. And so I began talking with students and parents to see what they wanted. They asked for more vocations. So I was able to come up with different things like a nail tech school and present those type of things like nail tech, lashes, waxing, eyelash, and things like that, and entrepreneurship and leadership. And so there's a lot of funding and things geared towards that. So I just wanted to put on the record to see how we could work together in tandem to get more students into those type of programs, and just say that I'm available in this capacity to try to bridge those gaps and make that happen. And one way that I see is if I could request to become a private school or an alternative school within the Brockton Public School District. That way I could help without taking students out of the district. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that information, and thank you for joining us tonight. And we should, as a committee, we should figure out why people weren't able to get into the building for school committee, so we'll work to, that can never happen. So we'll work with our custodial staff to make sure we can correct that. Thank you again. Thank you. We're going to continue agenda number 4, which is consent agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
A, B.
sorry.
Oh, I'm
There's-
sorry.
I
I'm
think
sorry.
one other person did. No? Okay, sorry.
No,
Thank you.
she didn't sign in, right? You good? Thank you. Thank you. Consent agenda is A, B, C, D, E, and F. Is there the will of the committee to take them collectively, or does anybody want to take them out of order? Or- Mr. Rodriguez, please.
I'd like to take E, section 5B only.
E. Mass Grads Promise Practice Grant?
Teacher diversification pilot program. 5B. Just the E,
Oh, E2.
bullet point number 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, E2. Okay. There's a motion by Mr. Rodriguez. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Second. All in favor? All opposed? We'll take that one out. Mr. Rodriguez, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The grant, it's for 600,000 teacher diversification pilot program, strategic initiatives. I'm just trying to get a clarification of how is this money actually going to be spent?
Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening. Thanks. So in the past, over the past couple of years, we've applied for the Teacher Diversification Grant through DESE. The first year, it was a pilot project, which was a small pot of money that we used for JET, Journey into Education and Teaching, which is continuously used to help paraprofessionals who don't yet hold a bachelor's degree to obtain their bachelor's and then work toward their licensure. The year after that, DESE gave us a larger pool of money because of the work that we had done with that. And over the last couple of years, what we've used that for is to help paraprofessionals and monitor teacher assistants, MTAs, who already hold their bachelor's, who are different from the JET program, to get into programs at Bridgewater State University, who's been a great partner with us, getting cohorts together specifically for bilingual education and for special education. So in the event that we receive that money, we've never received anything close to $600,000. I doubt we'll get that, but we'll continue to do that, which we've done through the Human Resources Office over the years. And we've been able to help some paraprofessionals and MTAs obtain their licensure and become teachers in the district.
Is there like an application process? How do you vet who gets to get into this program?
So over the years, the first year that we received the larger pool of money, in addition to having the coursework through Bridgewater State, we also were able to obtain vouchers for the MTEL exam, which I'm sure you know can be pricey. And we also had MTEL prep courses. So we had meetings over at West Middle School long ago, pre-COVID, I can't tell you the year. But what we did with that was we ensured that we included everybody in there, and anyone who was interested would sign up. At that time, we had enough to fund everybody. In the event that we didn't have enough money for everyone, we would come up with a lottery system.
Okay. Now, I know it's 600,000. Would you, once this actually gets rolled out, would you have an actual number? Let's say we can only put 50 or 60, but we have 180 that want to get in.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you provide what the actual cost would be?
Absolutely. In the past, we've had cohorts of 50. And we've never received 600,000. We received 118,000 last year, and we would be able to support 50 paraprofessionals and or MTAs for that.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rivas-Mendez, please.
Thank you. My question would be we know what just occurred this past year. Many of our educators of color were pink slipped. So my question is, this is an amazing grant, and thank you so much for applying for it from the human resources side and every aspect. But my concern is we invest in them from this grant that we made sure we got and we approve. What happens when they're a teacher? They lose seniority because they're no longer the paraprofessional MTA seniority. We just cut them, we invest in them, and what? They go on to a different district?
So unfortunately, yes, when it comes to a year when we have rifts like this one, the last people in the door are the first people cut. And if we've put this time and investment into elevating people who may participate in this teacher diversification grant, we do lose them. Thankfully, as I mentioned, we have recall rights in the event that if someone is riffed, if someone's pink slipped, and we don't have a position for them this year, or if they have taken a job in another district, when we contact them to be recalled, they do have 2 years of recall rights, and they're made well aware of that by the Human Resources Department. So we hope that when we do have a year like this, we get those people back, but we do run the risk of investing in them, using this grant money, hiring new teacher mentors for the proteges, and then losing them.
Yeah, and as we know, when you get pink slipped, it's really hard as a human being with our pride to come back, right? So I think this is great. I think we just need to start discussing and how do we retain them. That's like a big one for sure. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure.
Thank you, Mrs. Rivas-Mendez. Any other questions for the doctor? Thank you very much. Will the committee, do we want to take all the other matters collectively? It's the will of the committee. I entertain a motion.
Motion to take the other consent agenda items collectively.
There's a motion on the floor by Mr. Homer. Is there a second? Is there a second by Mrs. Sullivan? Before we take a vote, I'll just read that into the record. A is the approval of the minutes, facilities usage and planning subcommittee meeting dated July 11th, 2023. B is the approval of the minutes, bid review subcommittee meeting dated June 27th, 2023. C is the approval of the minutes, joint school committee and policy subcommittee meeting dated June 20th, 2023. D is the approval of the minutes, regular school committee meeting dated April 4th, 2023. E is a request for authorization to submit proposals and expenditures of funds. FY 2024 renewal for the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative in the amount of $750,000. Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Center for Instructional Support in the amount of $563,367. FY 2024 Office for Literacy and Humanities in $187,275 for FY 2023-2024 and $35,750 for FY 2025. Summer totaling in the amount of $223,025. Mass Grads Promising Practices Grant in the amount of $185,000 even. FY 2024 Brockton Shannon Project Grant, $85,000-$100,000. FY 2024 Mass Department of Public Health in the amount of $77,000 even. FY 2024 Plymouth County District Attorney's Office in the amount of $16,800. And finally, F is the acceptance of human resources notifications, personnel actions, leaves of absences, resignations, and retirements. We have a motion on the floor. It's properly seconded to take those collectively. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All
I'm
opposed?
sorry, Mayor, we skipped 5B. Did we skip that on purpose to approve it? The one that we just discussed on, the teacher diversification?
Oh, yeah, we already took that out, but we didn't, you're right, we didn't take a formal vote on it.
Yeah.
Teacher Diversification Pilot Program Grant, Center for Strategies Initiatives in the amount of $600,000. We did take that out, we did not take a motion, so, Mr. Homer and Mrs. Sullivan, could you please kindly just remove your motion on there collectively?
As stated, yes.
All right, great, thank you. Now the matter becomes before us. Mr. Rodriguez had taken it out, and we're going to take this as an individual vote. Again, Teacher Diversification Pilot Program Grant, Center of Strategic Initiatives in the amount of $600,000. There's been a motion. It was properly seconded. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. That passes. Now, Mr. Homer.
Motion to approve the consent agenda items, the remaining consent agenda items collectively.
Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. Is there your second? Motion was made by Mr. Homer, properly seconded by Mrs. Sullivan. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hands. Consent agenda has been passed. We will now go on to Agenda 5, which is the report of Superintendent of Schools, Mike Thomas. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. First, I'm going to bring up Dr. James LaBoulois, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, to give us an update. Doctor, do you have a presentation as well? Or?
I sure do, yep. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Mike, for the introduction. As you know, hello, school committee. As you know, I joined the Brockton community last year, and so I'm pleased to be here 1 year later, giving you an overview of some updates as well as some programmatic changes that the Office of Student Services it has made. Sorry, can you not hear me? Okay, sorry. I usually don't have this problem. It seems to be on. Can anybody hear me okay? Yes. Okay. So just as a maybe we could just advance the slide for me. That'd be, yeah, just, okay. So just so the committee has a sense of the topics for this evening, we're first I'll give you a brief review of my entry plan as I entered the role of Assistant Superintendent in Student Support. I'll give an update on our newly formed Office of Exceptional Learners, as well as a brief update of our Inclusion Action Plan, give you an update on our Office of Social and Emotional Learning, the Office of Re-Engagement Services, as well as a brief review of the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan, which is also included in its entirety in your packet for consideration of inclusion into the 23-24 Student Parent Handbooks. Is it working? I don't know. Thank you. So just a brief review. When I joined the district last July, the focus was really on beginning to meet people. So I had feedback sessions with hundreds of faculty and staff throughout the district. listen to them openly and honestly relative to things that were working well as things that they felt we could do better and improve our quality of services to students. We also did a comprehensive review of all existing documentation within the district and the office, including the district review from DESE, the TFM and corrective action plan, the strategic plan, the program review that was conducted a few years ago, looked at our MCAS data as well as our special education placement data. And what emerged was a real sense of urgency relative to the quality of our programming for students with disabilities in the district. The newly formed, if you could just advance, thanks. The new Office of Exceptional Learning takes the place of the old Office of Special Education. So previously, we had a Director of Special Education who was directly supported by an Assistant Director of Special Education, and there were a series of district-wide department heads who oversaw various programs in schools within the district. Under the new model, I am pleased to introduce to the committee formally, many of you met her during the pretty open hiring process for the new Associate Director of Exceptional Learning. But if I could briefly welcome Jamie Langley to the podium just to say a brief hello to the committee and the community. Jamie joins us just a few weeks ago as our inaugural Associate Director of Exceptional Learning, and I'll let Jamie introduce herself to the community and the committee.
Hi, everyone. It's good to see everyone. I appreciate being invited here to say hello, to meet some of the school committee. Thank you again. I did meet many of you during the interview process. I began as the Associate Director of Exceptional Learning on July 18th and hit the ground running. I know Jamie is going to talk more about the Assistant Directors of Special Education and our coordinators, but I'm pleased to say that now we have fully staffed with these positions, and so I'm really looking forward to working with the departments, families, community, and collaboratively across the district as we really look at our inclusion plan and educating students with disabilities.
And we are very excited to welcome Jamie to the Brockton community. As I give you a sense of sort of the reorganization that has happened in special education, what's important to note is we still have district-wide administrators who are there to support the operations of special education across the district. What we were thoughtful of was a real distribution of power out to the schools and being thoughtful that we are giving all of our special education teams full authority in their decision-making around programming for students. So what we did in partnership with the Brockton Education Association is we reimagined what the special education department leadership structure looks like. So under our Associate Director of Exceptional Learning, who you met this evening, Jamie, we now have 5 Assistant Directors of Special Education across all 4 of our levels, as well as 1 who supports our out-of-district students who are placed out of district. So we have an Assistant Director for high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, early childhood education, as well as out-of-district placements. So these key administrators in the district really support the implementation of IDEA regulations and student programming across levels. They are the go-to contact for our principals. They are the go-to contact who are supporting the implementation of plans, service delivery quality, and ensuring compliance with state and federal regulations. Now, the department is also supported by 5 full-time coordinators of special education. We have 1 coordinator overseeing related service providers, so our OT, PT, speech, vision, mobility specialists. We have 1 coordinator overseeing our inclusive learning programming in the district. So a real focus, which you'll hear more from me about in a minute, around purposeful inclusion of kids with disabilities in general education. Ensuring equal access is a commitment of the department, and we wanted to reflect that commitment in the leadership structure, that there is a full-time coordinator really focusing on the conditions necessary for effective inclusion in general education. We have a special education coordinator for specialized learning programs. So students in our, for students with learning disabilities or students with emotional behavioral disorders, there is somebody looking at ensuring new teachers' classrooms are set up. There are expectations around programming. They are ensuring that there is transition support from K through 12 throughout the entire district, as well as ensuring compliance and ensuring program quality in our classrooms, really focusing on teaching and learning. We have a special education coordinator overseeing and working with our autism spectrum disorder classrooms throughout the district, as well as a special education coordinator working to support our developmental programs, so kids with developmental or multi-handicaps in the program unique to those populations. So the new design offers the district support both horizontally through our levels throughout the district, as well as vertically ensuring sort of K-12 quality assurance and coherence of programming across our levels. This team will then directly support our principals, assistant principals, associates, our special educators, related service providers, our students, our parents, and our community members relative to the programming of special education. And as Jamie mentioned, those positions were just completely filled, so I'll ask just for a slide advance, please. And here is the new leadership team in special education. So our associate director, again, is Ms. Jamie Langley. Our 5 assistant directors of special education, Sherry Kearns at the high school level, Danielle Wynn at middle schools, Brian Gentile at our elementary level, Kelly Dunham at early childhood, and Michelle Lanner is our out-of-district placement assistant director. In terms of our programmatic coordinators, we have Dr. Christine Tucker, who's leading our related services department, Catherine Cunningham, who is taking the lead in inclusive learning programming across the district, Ginny Lundstead, overseeing our specialized learning programs, Caitlin Fitzgerald, who's working with our autism spectrum disorder programs, and Dr. Diane Davis, who will be working with our developmental programs throughout the district. Again, this was a real thoughtful shift in how we do business in special education. The focus, we're really beginning to move the focus into the quality of our teaching and learning, examining the conditions that exist within our classrooms, not only to ensure equal access, but to ensure students who are in our special education or specialized programs are achieving at a rate commensurate with their non-disabled peers. It's also worth mentioning, just this week, that new special education team is coming together for a leadership retreat to really begin to get to know each other, understand the expectations and the roles that they've all will now be working in. In the second day of the retreat, they'll be joined by all of the general education leaders in the district. As you know, the Brockton Public Schools, in partnership with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has been really looking carefully and closely at the rates of inclusion of our students with disabilities in general education. We know that equity of access makes a difference for lifelong goals and outcomes. So our goal is to really commit the district to make a significant investment in the full inclusion of kids with disabilities through actualizing our inclusion action plan. So I won't get into the entire plan this evening, but I will tell you is the plan is focused on 5 key goals, essentially establishing those conditions necessary for effective inclusion to occur within our classrooms. The first goal is to, and as you know, we have been working all last year on the building of a multi-tiered model, a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS. So the number 1 goal is to establish comprehensive multi-tiered systems of support in social and emotional learning with consistent instructional support team protocols and procedures, consistent forms, members, and data systems, as well as consistent student screening and interventions across the district. We are really trying to uniform our intervention model, so regardless of what school you attend, you have access to the exact same supports and services available, for example, in another school at the same level in another part of the city. The second goal is to really focus on the expansion of professional development opportunities with a real focus on universal design for learning as the core principle and part of the gateway into effective inclusion. If we start from the beginning of our instructional planning, ensuring everybody can find access, right, then we are ensuring that all kids can sort of demonstrate their knowledge in ways that make sense relative to their strengths and their weaknesses. So again, universal design for learning will take a center stage as we begin the next academic year to really be a pathway for effective inclusion. The third goal is really looking at educator collaboration. and ensuring that special education staff are fully represented in professional learning communities, grade levels, and academic department meetings. So ensuring that, for example, when the high school English department meets, that there is a special education representative there to talk about how special education can, or how the special education team can support learning that occurs across all of our academic departments. We'll also go forward focusing on ensuring that what our programming is based on student need and not just because that's what we've always done. So we're really going to be looking carefully at student programming to ensure it emphasizes the importance of full inclusion and that we're giving all kids opportunities to succeed in general education. The fifth goal is we're going to be looking at existing written IEPs, so really doing a deep data review of what is in the IEPs currently and ensuring student access to general education. And that any time a student is removed from general education, there is a comprehensive reason and articulation of what they need to, what skill they need when they're not there in order to ensure that they can access it later. So it's not just you come out and never get in again. If you do have to leave general education, what are the skills and knowledge necessary for you to return to general ed and be successful? So that data review, again, will be conducted by that comprehensive team, that new leadership team in special education. What I'll also say is special inclusion is not only the responsibility of special education, right? It is a shared collective responsibility of every single educator in the district, which is why, again, day 2 of our special education retreat will be in partnership with all of the district general education leaders to ensure shared responsibility. And you'll hope to see goals across all departments expanding access and having all of our academic departments in the district own the work of ensuring effective inclusive opportunities for all of our learners. I also want to bring you a brief update. We now have a fully formed Office of Social and Emotional Learning. So the Office of Social and Emotional Learning is being led by our Director of Social and Emotional Learning. Underneath that director, and I should mention John Snellgrove is our Director of Social and Emotional Learning. He has accepted the appointment and he will begin on next Tuesday as his first day in the role. The Director of Social and Emotional Learning really then has 3 key components of his role. The first one is we have a new coordinator of school-based therapeutic and behavioral health. And that is, for those that who might know her, Linda Lacurdo is our school-based coordinator for therapeutic and behavioral health. And this role supervises our therapeutic support counselors, as well as our board-certified behavior analysts, as well as our tiered behaviorists. She also will have responsibility for 2 new programs, which I'll talk to you more about in just a few minutes. But we are opening in September 2 new stabilization centers in the district. One will focus on a therapeutic stabilization. The other will focus on behavioral stabilization. Again, both of those programs will be fully staffed, as well as have access to education and teachers. But what we want to be thoughtful of here is we're providing an experience in the district where kids can seek that stabilization they need without having to go out necessarily for an out-of-district placement, an out-of-district 45-day evaluation, or also use it as a support for a step down from hospitalizations. We are seeing an increase in the number of psychiatric hospitalizations of our students. So apart from that sort of school-based therapeutic and behavioral health, we have underneath the Director of Social and Emotional Learning is our Supervisor of Community Mentoring and Outreach. So Mario Lamar is our Supervisor of Community Mentoring. He has done a wonderful job this summer really reimagining the role of a community mentor, ensuring out-of-school time support for all of our learners, as well as weekend and vacation programming, which will be a part of the mentoring program with a fully reimagined job description, as well as recruiting, which will soon get underway for a new cohort of community mentors to really support the social and emotional programming that's happening in the district. And finally, but certainly not least, the major goal of the Director of Social and Emotional Learning will be to oversee the rollout of our social and emotional learning curriculum, as well as supervise and support our newly formed school-based support teams. So every school has assigned a school psychologist, school adjustment counselors, as well as a school-based team chairperson. And so the role of the director of social emotional learning with the team chairs, for example, is really relative to that MTSS model for social emotional learning. They will also have a role in special education as well as Section 504 plans. But the goal for this relationship is really to support the ongoing data review in social emotional learning and ensuring that we're partnering the right resources and supports with the students who need them the most based on data. So just a brief update on some social emotional learning. I know it came up earlier in discussion. We partnered last year with the Department of Elementary Secondary Education as a part of the multi-tiered system of support, social and emotional learning and mental health cohort. So we were part of that academy team that got the resources directly from the state on how to build a multi-tiered model that would be responsive to student need. We also then formed a district-based task force of a wide cross-section of staff and employees in the district to really help us identify what tiered programming we need to be doing and be thoughtful of that's unique to Brockton. I'm happy to report that we have identified a Tier 1 social and emotional learning curriculum, and it's called Character Strong. So that will roll out to every school in the district beginning in October 1. So all of our teachers are being trained on September 11, so that release day. Do know that our educators will be engaged in professional learning, really getting their, rolling up their sleeves and getting into the implementation of social and emotional learning. Our superintendent, Mike Thomas, has made a commitment to the opening of school being focused on relationships and building trusting collaborative partnerships with students, families, and staff. And we will be utilizing a lot of the Character Strong materials to support that work that's going to be happening throughout the month of September as we get up and running with social and emotional learning in our schools. We also have a part of this work has also been updating the DCAP, or the District Curriculum Accommodation Plan, more on that a little bit later, and alignment of the DCAP with this new multi-tiered model. We want to make sure that we're effectively communicating to partners in the community. Here is how we conceptualize what happens when a student experiences difficulty in school. Here's the process that we follow, and here's how you can seek support for your student should you feel like they need that. I will also note that we are continuing our partnership with Suffolk University for the full rollout of restorative justice in our schools come this fall. What's important to note about restorative justice is we are not replacing our discipline code or somehow not holding kids accountable for their behavior. What restorative justice recognizes is the importance of the relationship, so that when something bad happens in a school or someone's behavior raises to the level that they must be removed from that community, there has been damage done. The relationships have been damaged. And so rather than just sending a student out for X days, having them not engage in any kind of support or opportunity to actually come back, develop a reentry plan, and own their own piece of that relationship, that broken piece of that relationship. We feel like it's really important. If we really want to see our students for who they are, we must offer them every opportunity to own their own behavior and make amends with those they've harmed. If they're going to be active, productive citizens in society, we need to offer them opportunities to really demonstrate who they are as human beings. So that continues. We have a fall training cohort with Suffolk, which will include all of our new administrators who were just hired over the last couple of months. So do know that that partnership will continue. And later, when we get to the handbooks, you will notice that we are proposing an assertion for restorative practices and discipline as a philosophy in the handbooks. And last but not least, we have a completely redesigned, trauma-informed instructional support team problem-solving process. So now where we are is we're thinking about the child multidimensionally. So it's no longer are we programming and being thoughtful around, say, for the child's behavior or just their reading skill. We're really trying to take a comprehensive view of a student as the center of an entire system of support, including family, community partners, community groups, as well as involvement with state agencies, to really make sure that when we provide supports to students, we're doing it with a multidimensional lens and programming for all parts of them, not just the part that we see those 6.5 hours a day that they're with us in school. So there will be training and support rolling out to our school-based teams on this newly revised model, as well as establishing auxiliary programs. For example, the Behavior Stabilization, the Therapeutic Stabilization Center, as well as our Center for Restorative Justice, New Beginnings, which I'll talk about in just a couple minutes when we get to the Re-engagement Services, Office of Re-engagement Services update. So again, I don't want anyone to think that any of this is being done in isolation. So actually, we are establishing metrics to gauge our effectiveness at implementing the social emotional learning program in Brockton. We are making a significant investment in the social, emotional, and mental health of our students, and we will evaluate our effectiveness at this work by looking at results of the vocal survey. That is administered as a part of the MCAS administration, so all students will complete the vocal survey. It is completely, they have their choice to complete it or not, so some students may choose to not complete it, but it is a part of the MCAS administration, particularly in certain grades, and we're using the fiscal, the 21-22 and 22-23 school year data as baseline, right, because we're just about to launch, so we'll look at the data from this spring of 24 and see if we've shown growth in school culture and climate as measured by the data on the vocal survey. We also will have the results from our SEL and mental health screenings. So as a part of our SEL model, just like we screen students in reading and mathematics, we'll also be screening for social and emotional learning and be looking at sort of pre-post interventions or pre-post data from our interventions that we provide. So all students will be screened come October of this year in social emotional learning. So we're not waiting for students to demonstrate challenge. We are actually screening all and then doing front-loaded interventions to ensure those that may be at risk or struggling are provided the support necessary as the year opens. We're also going to be measuring district-wide changes in the use of exclusionary discipline with our students. So the number of days kids are removed from school, we're hoping to see as a result of the implementation of these SEL initiatives, that number begin to decline over time. So that's another data metric that we're keeping an eye on to evaluate the program's effectiveness. And finally, we have been in partnership with Boston University in administering district-wide social and emotional wellness surveys that went out to all of our community members and went to all of our students as well as our faculty. The administration of this survey closed on June 16th, and we have a total of 1,402 faculty and staff who have completed it, 4,383 students have completed it, and 375 parents and community members have completed it. Now, the full results will be presented to the committee as well as to all of our schools this coming fall in the next few weeks. We saw preliminary drafts, but we will be reopening the community survey and doing another push in partnership with communications this fall. Given our total enrollment and population, the number of 375, I think we can do better. So we'll be doing, in partnership with communication, another push. What's important to note here is these surveys are looking at people's own lived experiences in the space of social emotional learning. What we're thoughtful of is that if we were to re-administer the survey in a year or 2 years from now, again, this is another data point, right, to gauge to what extent are we being effective in the work that we're doing to ensure a safe and welcoming, inclusive environment that honors kids' social and emotional learning as a key part of the quality of their academic program. So a little bit more about the stabilization center. So I know in July this came up in dialogue, and Mike said I'd be here to talk more about it. So these two stabilization centers are there to support students in grades 1 through 12. Both the therapeutic and the behavioral have similar setups, but they're not the same. So we are recognizing students presenting with more internalizing therapeutic needs are not the same as students presenting with more externalizing behaviorally based needs, right? So we really want to be thoughtful of supporting students in those two unique domains. Both for the therapeutic stabilization, we're targeting students who may have been temporarily removed from their home school due to a major emotional or mental health crisis or ongoing mental health challenges. At the center, at the stabilization center, they will receive a comprehensive assessment that can last up to 45 school days. It will be staffed by teachers, a board-certified behavior analyst, as well as a therapeutic support counselor, as well as a consulting psychiatrist who will be available to support the evaluations of students at the stabilization center. The goal for the program, both programs, is to support students, stabilize them, and then ensure that the sending schools are ready to receive them back. So part of the work that team is doing is going out to the schools to ensure the right support systems are there, the right structures are there. Oftentimes kids are removed and they do some work on themselves, they come back in a different place, and sometimes when they return, we're not ready to receive them in the right way. So we're going to be doing a lot of work with the staff as they receive students back to ensure that we're prepared, we have the right plan, we understand kids' motivators and reinforcers, and we are ready collaboratively to ensure their success in that school. It's not a pathway to an out-of-district placement, right? It's an in-district stabilization without eventual return to school. Same is true on the behavioral side. So again, kids who have been temporarily removed from their home school due to a major behavioral challenge. They'll also have the same support, so teachers, behaviorists, therapeutic support counselor, consulting psychiatrist, and again, supporting students' re-entry back to school. So again, an in-district stabilization center is a significant need. What we found last year is we did not have the internal capacity to support those students as best we could, so many of them ended up leaving Brockton for short-term 45-day evaluations and then eventual return, and it got to a point where even those centers filled. So we had students on waiting lists. So when we open the year, we actually will have 2 students enrolled in each because we could not find an alternate placement for a 45-day evaluation prior to the end of the school year. The same experiences we're seeing in Brockton with the sort of the level of need for social and emotional mental health is being seen across the Commonwealth and across the country. And those district, local programs that do that 45-day evaluation work found themselves at capacity by February of last year. So we're hoping that in-district programming can actually improve the quality of resources as well as contain some of the out-of-district costs that we've been experiencing because of these placements. The Office of Re-Engagement Services is a new office under student support. And what I will note is it's really a redesign of several existing district programs. So what we essentially did is the Office of Re-Engagement Services is being led by a Chief Officer of Re-Engagement Services. Underneath that chief officer, we have our traditional re-engagement office, which is staffed by a school adjustment counselor and a re-engagement officer. That's Paulo and Jordan Cruz, for those that know the people in the district. They have been working with us for a number of years in that re-engagement space. And one of the biggest variables that we found preventing students from re-engaging with us was having a location to go. So when they would go out to sort of recruit dropouts. So I should note, re-engagement really focuses on students aged grade 9 to 10-ish and up. So 16 and up, you're legally in Massachusetts allowed to drop out of school. So it generally, for sort of pre-K through 15, we refer to as attendance officers, right? But in the high school, 16 plus, that's re-engagement. It's a different kind of work because now we're dealing with kids who can legally drop out, and we have to do a different kind of recruiting back to the district. By having the only pathway for reentry into the district, enrollment in a traditional brick and mortar school, what we found was that by January of last year, all of our alternative options were full. So we ended the year with about 45 students who wanted to re-engage but had nowhere to go. That's a problem for me. It's a problem for all of us. And so what that caused us to do was think really differently around the programming we're doing at re-engagement. So the new re-engagement center will be that place open from 8 to 4 every single day, staffed at some point, all throughout that time period, I should say, by staff who are willing to receive kids as they drop in. So if you work 7 to 3 and can't get there to 3:30, don't worry. Drop into the re-engagement center. Someone will be there to meet you, and they will set you up with a reentry plan. They will work with you to get re-engaged in school, and the goal is to eventually have you enroll in a traditional brick and mortar at Brockton High School or at Edison Day or Edison Evening. But oftentimes when kids are coming back from dropping out, it's hard to go from 0 to a full course load of 6. So the idea is we'll be utilizing the MyCap individual planning protocol with every single student at the re-engagement center, where they're developing individual planning around what they want out of school. And then our team at re-engagement center will really be getting them set up, ensuring they're making progress towards towards high school credit, and that they are eventually re-enrolled not only in the school, but in the program that makes sense for them for their long-term plans. So we're very excited about this opportunity. So again, it's the traditional re-engagement office really reimagined and relocated to actually have a drop-in center. We also will have at that location our attendance office. So we have 4 attendance officers, and they will also be housed out of the re-engagement center. They do very similar work. What's changing going into next year is we are partnering with Sean's office and data and really focusing on internal monitoring systems so that we don't have to wait a week or 2 for a referral to be made before the attendance office intervenes. So they'll be using ongoing data checks to intervene prior to needing a referral, and we will be monitoring, watching all students' enrollments in attendance to ensure we're intervening sooner rather than later. Oftentimes, because of the logistics of referrals and the system that existed prior, is we were waiting until the teacher noticed someone was out for 3 days, and then it went to the adjustment counselor, then it went to the principal, then there's a referral to the attendance office. By the time that all happens, 10 days have gone by, and it's the 3rd week of school. And if that continued, we're now at risk of chronic absenteeism. As you know, 10% or more of a school year, you're considered chronically absent. And so our attendance office, rather than relying on referral data, will be partnering to ensure data systems exist so that intervening on the front end without the need for a referral. The other piece here is because of that work that we're doing with individual kids as they work to re-enroll in the district, our department head for middle school guidance will also be spending time at the re-engagement center supporting that MyCap work and ensuring things like student schedules and course loads are communicated back to sending schools, and that as we prepare to re-enter kids into our programs and schools, that she is that facilitator in the guidance department between the re-engagement center and the actual school. The other piece that will be there at the Office of Re-engagement Services at that center is our Center for Restorative Justice. So that is essentially our New Beginnings program. So when students have been removed for long-term periods from school, whether that's for any variety of reason, one of the options they will be provided is to, instead of sitting at home or maybe engaging in some online learning, to actually come into the re-engagement center, be a part of that New Beginnings model, where our staff there, consisting of a supervisor of restorative justice as well as some restorative justice mentors, will really be working with them on the principles of restorative justice, understanding that how their behavior has impacted others, and really working to ensure a reentry plan to the school for when they come back from that disciplinary removal. The teaching and learning that will happen at the re-engagement center will be supported by, and actually on the right-hand side, I apologize, that should actually be 3 full-time teachers. We are putting in place a full-time humanities teacher, to handle ELA and social studies, a full-time STEM teacher, as well as will be a full-time special educator there to ensure students with disabilities who are working to re-engage are given the supports and services necessary to be successful. So again, I kind of get into this already. The Re-engagement Center will provide out-of-school youth and students who are off track with a supportive environment, personalized plan, to obtain a diploma while supporting post-graduation college and career opportunities. And the New Beginnings Center for Restorative Justice will serve middle and high school students who are experiencing disengagement from school due to disciplinary challenges. Students may be referred to the Center for Guidance and Instruction to address these challenges while awaiting re-enrollment or re-entry into a Brockton school. So again, we piloted small scale last year at our Get You to the Gate program. It was incredibly successful for those that engaged, and now we're looking to bring it in more formally as a part of our programming for the district. We're getting there, I promise. The district curriculum accommodation plan, this is when we went through our tiered focus monitoring review, the Department of Elementary Secondary Education highlighted this as one of the areas for improvement. And so Mass General Law, Chapter 71, Section 38Q.5, outlines in the regulations the responsibility of a school principal. And one of the responsibilities of all of our schools is to ensure that our curriculum that we teach here is accessible to all learners. And so the district curriculum accommodation plan really outlines the strategies to assist general education teachers to help help them analyze and accommodate various learning needs, including students who are English language learners, as well as to manage students' behaviors effectively. You don't need an IEP or a 504 plan for some general accommodations that we can give you to accommodate learning. And so what this document does is it outlines those accommodations that our teachers should be using when a student begins to experience difficulty, and then really supporting through the IST process new interventions while implementing the district's DCAP. The document also outlines the district's multi-tiered system of support, as well as direct and specific instruction in SEL, reading and math for all students, as well as the instructional support team model and structures that will roll out to the district this fall. That was a lot, and I appreciate that that was a lot, so I'm happy to take any questions or offer any clarifying points. But I want to just take a moment as we wrap up to thank Mike, Mr. Thomas, our superintendent, Sharon and Jim, our deputies, and the entire team for a wonderful first year. And as you can see, we got a lot of wonderful things done. And I believe the Office of Student Support is moving in the right direction to ensure success for all learners. So thank you for your time, and I'll defer to the committee for any questions.
Do we have any questions at all?
I should have a comment.
Mr. Rivas-Mendez, please.
This presentation just shows how much work your department and you have done in restructuring and understanding the needs of our district. I know I've had side conversations with you specifically about the difference of the therapeutic, social-emotional therapeutic, but also the behavioral. And just like, it was a lot, I'll be honest with you.
It was a lot, yes.
But for some questions that I was able to think about in the moment, for the public, when you emphasize expectations of the associate directors of special ed versus the SPED coordinators, what's the difference between them? So I'm thinking about a parent, right, or a family. Usually the first line is the teacher, but then what communication do they have? Is it the next line, the SPED coordinator, and what is the difference between the SPED coordinator and the associate director?
So in terms of parents and support, so again, the parent's first line of connection is always going to be with the classroom teacher, right? That's the relationship we really want to support and develop. If we're at an impasse or working through challenges, and I should note that as the year opens, the special ed department will be communicating to all parents the new structure and who to contact and sort of a line flow of who to call. But the role of the coordinator is to really focus on teaching and learning in those strands. If there's real concerns or issues, then it really should go to the assistant directors at the appropriate level to help manage in partnership with the principal and the associate and the assistant principals in the buildings, any issues that might be. We want our coordinators focusing on growing and developing the instructional skill and methods of our educators, of our specialists, and really impacting kids in the classroom. Our assistant directors then take that sort of administrative role to problem solve, work with families. That doesn't mean the coordinator isn't available or can't be there to partner, but if there's a concern, it should go to the assistant director for that level.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So in IEP meetings, associate directors are going to be there, sped quarter, no?
No, there'll be a team chair who will facilitate. And if we're looking at a continuation of a particular placement, then the classroom teacher will have more than enough knowledge. If there's any concerns, then you certainly can invite the district administration to be there. But that's not general practice. We don't generally have our administrators at IEP meetings.
Okay, thank you. And then I was wondering about the supervisor community mentoring and outreach role. So is that person going to also work hand in hand with the programs that currently are in our district, like the mentoring nonprofit programs that are in? Are they working collaboratively, or is it two separate things?
A little bit of both. So they're not the same program. I know the term mentoring can be used sort of pretty openly and a lot. The district mentors, now our supervisor, Mario Lamar, is well known to the community. He's a real value and asset in the community, and he has partners with all of the other mentoring programs in the district. What we're thoughtful of is ensuring sort of Brockton Public Schools-based mentoring as maybe an intervention coming out of the IST model for a student who might need that level of support, as well as out-of-school time programming to ensure afternoons, weekends, school vacations kids are programmed for, and that we're really sort of establishing that relationship with a community-based person. So they work collaboratively in terms of programming. We're not going to sort of, if there's a basketball program running in community mentoring, in that community agent mentoring group A, we're not going to sort of run a competing program. So there is collaboration and communication so that we're ensuring a whole swath of supports for our students. But Mario, in his work, is really clear that Brockton Public Schools has our own unique mentoring program focused on students through the district. So there's a partnership, but there's no, there's a sort of healthy separation relative to who's involved in what.
Thank you. And the last comment I have is I'm really excited to hear more about that ongoing data of being able to really be intentional about how students, when they're on IEPs, bringing them back in the classroom. I'm really excited to see that data, that ongoing data. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any, Mr. Rodriguez, please.
Thank you, Chair. Do we have a list of our outside mentoring programs that we contract out? Because I would like to know who these mentors are in our schools, and what services they provide, what qualifications, what training do they have for their staff. And then also, when I look at, I've had conversations with Mario, is when we look at our mentors, I think we have a failure where we're not addressing our female population in the district.
Sure.
So we have to make sure we focus on getting some mentors for our females as well.
Absolutely. I'll let Mike address. I don't believe
There are no outside mentoring programs coming this year. It's all in-house, so there'll be no contracted with any mentoring programs. It's all will fall under Jamie and then Mario. And you're right, when we put the job ad out for community mentors, we really need to look for more female mentors, because that has been a real struggle, trying to find, recruit, and retain female mentors, and Mario has been clear about that, and that's been an issue we've had for the last probably 4 years, trying to really, keep, really good female mentors, so we have that balance of male and female. But this year, there was no budget for any outside contracted mentors.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Any additional questions at all? Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
So next up, I believe, is it Deputy Superintendent Wolder? Are you leading the next presentation? At the end, and the team, the teaching and learning team and others, so several of the assistant superintendents. So at the end of the year, we have to give DESE our strategic prioritization end of the year update. This is part of our MOA with the Department of Education, basically giving them an update on where we are with our progress throughout the year on our goals and our strategic plan. So you'll get a presentation, an abbreviated presentation that was given to the Department of Ed but I believe I sent that, and make sure we put the full presentation will be in your packet. So they're going to give you a abbreviated one that we did this at the end of June. So thank you, Sharon.
Good evening. And as I was getting set up, I think the superintendent already said this, but if I'm repeating myself, please forgive me. I do listen, but in that moment, I didn't quite hear what he was saying. But ultimately, what we are reviewing with you tonight is information that we shared with the Department of Education at the end of the school year. So in June, at the end of this June school year, we, through our district prioritization, had to provide them an end-of-year report. We provided them a mid-cycle report. We shared that with all of you after that presentation. And so at the end of the year, we had to say, here's where we are in the work that we were doing with our priorities for this school year. Tracy, you said it would work. You'll click, thank you. It's all right. So we're having a little bit of an issue with the clicker, so they're going to click for us. So what you see there is how we framed our presentation to the Department of Education, telling our story, identifying again our priorities and the work that was done under priority 1, which was high quality learning experiences, and you'll hear from the team more about that. And priority 2 was really a lot of what Jamie presented to you and more, because our welcoming and inclusive environment work tied to our multi-tiered systems of support and the redesign of our unified services under the student support services. So you've already heard that part, and the Making Money Matters was a priority for us as well, which is really looking at how our students with disabilities are doing in high school and making sure that they're graduating. And so all of the work that Jamie just presented to you, we won't go back over that because you've heard it thoroughly tonight, and he's welcome, I'm sure would be happy to come back and give you a more detailed report on any of that later at a later time. So we are going to spend the rest of this presentation just really talking about priority 1 and then are looking ahead, because we did have to identify some areas to look ahead. So as you know, we walked in here every time we did a presentation and said, this is our mission. We exist to move our children to proficiency, and we organize ourselves to do so. And what you saw earlier was organizing ourselves to move our students to proficiency, and what you'll hear from us is that continued organization. And we have had some changes along the way, as you well know, through our budgets and some of the things that we've had to do, but we continue to really make sure that our focus is on how we organize ourselves to support our teachers in those classrooms and to make sure our kids are getting what they need. And so priority 1 was high quality learning experiences using high quality instructional materials, and that is outlined in our strategic plan as well. Everything that we did connected, so we had district priorities lifted out of that strategic plan and really focused on the work that we needed to do across our system. And part of the work that we did, and we talked to you a bit about the TAG grant, the Targeted Assistant Grant that we got through the Department of Education, that really required us to make some efforts within our schools to organize and look at data and look at how we were doing work beyond getting the instructional materials. How else were we really supporting our schools? And so every school got a proficiency commitment leadership team that Mike and I met with every other month, and they met a couple of times a month in addition to the meetings with us, every school had one, and one of the things that we made them take a look at was their own data, because we can present data to people all the time, but internalizing that data and really elevating the voices of teachers who sat on those committees to take a look at the data and figure out some of the things that they wanted to be able to do for students was the focus of that work. And so they did an equity data protocol that tied to their school improvement plans, and we said at the end, ultimately, we needed them to present their own story. So the next couple of slides, we gave examples from high school, middle, and elementary, where the schools then presented their own stories, because we wanted DESE to not only hear from us as a district, but also to hear from the schools. So, and here's an example of Brockton Highs, again, looking at what is the data, what were their goals in their school improvement plan, and how they were organizing themselves in order to start to make the move forward in the work that they were doing. You can go to the next one. And as you can see, one of the areas that they targeted was in attendance, and how they were going to really try to move attendance forward with some of the strategies that they were employing as they wanted to ensure that kids were coming back, because one of the areas that we really discussed was the impact that attendance has had on student achievement, and how those gaps in those moments when they're not in school, how that's impacting their instruction, their ability to access the instruction, and ultimately their outcomes. And so a number of schools really targeted attendance, and we went from telling kids to stay home, if you have the sniffles, stay home, to come back, and trying to shift that thinking in whether or not they should come or go. We really had to do some work to encourage kids to get back into school and back into school regularly. And so that was one of the areas a number of schools targeted. We can look at the middle school. And so here was North, again, looking at their own data, looking at the data of the district, and identifying some of the areas that they as a school wanted to really target in order to improve outcomes for students. And again, another look at their data. And so they were looking at how they organize themselves, their schedule, their instruction, and really started to dig into looking at the outcomes for English learners. A number of them were also looking at outcomes for students with disabilities. And again, going back to that idea that we need to make sure that our students have access to the curriculum and that they're able to learn in inclusive environments. In order to get to that place where people start to really feel connected to those messages, it's really powerful to have them look at the data and to do some problem solving on their own about how we can provide students with better access. And North was one of the schools that really was digging into that work. Next. And here's an example from the elementary level, looking at their ELA and math, and really using their STAR data to determine how they were doing. You see the bars there, ultimately drilling down into that information and figuring out who's represented in each of those categories and what they can do to increase and improve the outcomes for those students. And again, you see another one looking at attendance and determining how to improve attendance, how to get students feeling welcomed, comfortable, and wanting to come back to school. And so the schools, again, the proficiency commitment leadership teams were primarily teachers working with their administrators in their schools, targeting the data that connected to their school improvement plans, and really looking at how our district priorities were helping them move things forward for students and coming up with their own plans. And we'll continue that work this year. Every school, again, will have a team. They'll have more time because we'll get them started earlier and give them more time throughout the year to really engage in that work. But you can shift to the next slide. Looking back at, again, the high quality learning experiences, that's the data and how we were looking at it, using the resources that we had, going back into what was the instruction, what was the resources, and what were those outcomes. And so Karen's gonna come up and present for the elementary level. I'm sorry, next slide. I guess I have one more to go. So here's the everything slide. So those high-quality instructional materials, as you know, we did a full rollout of Wonders, and that started in March, and so that the beginning of Wonders will begin at the beginning of this year, but our teachers and administrators are well-versed in Wonders, and they took it and ran with it and started to really move faster than we thought they would, and we've gotten some really good use out of the resources and continue to get use out of it, and people are getting stronger in how they're implementing our curriculum. At the middle school level, we had Study Sync and Carnegie, and as you know, because Michelle presented on that, the last time that we have TNTP and Carnegie partnering with us to really support the work of our coordinators to roll that out with fidelity and purpose. And at the high school level, we began the development of our ELA curriculum. We'll continue to work on those on not only ELA, but on science and social science, and we also have Carnegie for Math, which we started out a little rocky, according to what most people have said, but as the year progressed, the teachers really started to take off with Carnegie, and so we foresee a much stronger start of the year using those resources. And so, again, high-quality instructional materials provides teachers with what they need in order to deliver that instruction that we know they are showing up every day to deliver, and we are doing our best to support them and to make sure our English learners and our students with disabilities have access to those, and the teachers are getting some training in those areas as well to really support those learners. So are we ready? I think the next slide really is Karen's.
I do realize that slide has a lot of words, especially for this time of day. So if you look to the left side of the slide, there's a summary of the winter to spring that kind of just, those three statements kind of capture what we saw in the elementary data as we looked at winter into spring. When we looked at all students, generally speaking, there was positive movement, but we saw it at a slower pace than what we had seen fall into winter. And when I say at a slower pace, what I mean by that is if, for example, there was an increase fall to winter of 10%, so 10% more students were meeting expectations, let's say, then we would expect the second half of the year to see another 10% movement into that category. And so if we didn't see 10%, if we saw less than that, then it was, the thinking around it was a slower pace than what we saw fall into winter. So that's what I mean by pace. Students with disabilities, mostly positive movement, and we saw that at a faster pace. So it would have been more than 10%, for example, if it were a 10% increase fall into winter. And for our multilingual learners, we actually saw some backwards movement. So to break it down a little more specifically, in reading for students, and this is true for all students as well as students with disabilities, we saw a continued to move out of the not meeting expectations bucket. So when we were looking at data, we were looking both at hopefully moving students into the meeting expectations bucket, but also out of the not meeting expectations bucket. And so we saw them moving out of the not meeting expectations from winter into spring. However, the pace at which that happened was slower in the first half of the year for all students and faster for students with disabilities. For our multilingual learners, the percent of students not meeting expectations actually increased when we looked at the winter to spring data. These data, what we're thinking about is these data could be connected to the expected negative impact of year one implementation of HQIM and the positive effect of the work that the Office of Student Support Services, now the Office of Unified Student Support Services, has done with our MSN, our special needs teachers around ECRI, which stands for Enhanced Core Reading Instruction. And it's basically the idea that literacy instruction or curriculum on their own don't necessarily do a perfect job of really supporting students' reading skills. And so ECRI is really a collection of routines that teachers do in the classroom that are really rooted in the science of reading, using whatever curriculum the district has adopted. And so what that translates to in the special education world is doing specialized instruction using ECRI as the vehicle, and it's rooted in the core curriculum. And so that work was initiated this year, and so that might be why we saw this faster pace of increase, especially in our students with disabilities group. In math, there was little, if any, movement out of the not meeting expectations performance level from winter to spring. That was true for all students and students with disabilities. That's similar to what we saw in fall to winter. And for our multilingual learners, the percent actually increased from winter into spring. And this lack of movement out of the meeting expectations and movement into for our multilingual learners, we think has to do with a lack of a progress monitoring tool, like what we have in the reading world. So in reading, we have Lexia that provides some real ongoing timely data, very specific, very skill-focused data that gives teachers some really valuable information about what specific instruction students need. And we don't have something like that in the math world. There are products that exist, we just don't have one at this time. And so we think that might be the explanation for why we see the movement of students out of not meeting expectations for reading, but we don't see that same degree of movement for students out of the that bucket for math. In reading, the pattern of movement into meeting or exceeding expectations from winter to spring really mirrors what we saw in terms of movement out of not meeting expectations. The pace for all students was slower winter into spring than it had been fall into spring. And the pace for students with disabilities was actually greater. So there was more movement of students with disabilities into that meeting or exceeding expectations. And the percent of multilingual learners actually decreased in the meeting and exceeding expectations bucket. And this provides some additional support for the conclusions noted above. One of the things that we have had a lot of conversation about and think might be going on in terms of what we see in the data related to the multilingual learners, for example, is we, as Deputy Superintendent Sharon Walder pointed out, we are in our second half of the first year of implementation of the Wonders curriculum, and we provide ESL services in the literacy world through the literacy content. ESL is content all on its own, but is delivered through a content area such as math or literacy or science, depending on what the model is. For us, it's through literacy. So we have spent a lot of time implementing Wonders for the first time, and so we are matching our efforts with that to developing what does it look like to deliver ESL in a Wonders world. And so that's a couple of steps behind the Wonders implementation. So we are hopeful that our focus and strategic work around really building up how we deliver ESL, for example, using the Wonders material, that we're really ramping that up as we head into this second half of the first full year. And then finally, for math, winter into spring, we saw all students moving into meeting or exceeding performance at a quicker pace than in reading. We expected that because of where math is in its implementation. However, this was at a slower pace than we observed in the fall into winter, and similar to reading, movement of students with disabilities into the meeting or exceeding expectation for math from winter to spring was again at a quicker pace than observed fall into winter, and the percentage of multilingual learners decreased winter to spring as compared to fall into winter. And so we raised this question at the end, which we actually raised in thinking of all of the data. Could this point to a need to create structures specifically designed to transition in and support multilingual learners who enter Brockton Public Schools mid-year? Because when we look at the data, we do have a lot of students who come in throughout the year. And are we thinking about what structures they might need as they transition into the district for support, both in creating those supportive structures, but also just academically, and us being able to really understand where they're at and what their needs might be. So we've had a lot of conversation about that. So I do again apologize for so many words so late in the evening, but that summary to the left kind of captures all of what's there. And the next two slides, which I will not review because they are summarized in what I just shared with you. Just a note on this slide, because you'll see the same thing in the secondary slides. On this particular one, because it's the percent of change not meeting expectations, it's students moving out of the not expectations bucket, which is what we want to see happen. Those negative numbers are actually good news stories. We want that percentage to go down. So that is sort of the visual of the data of what I just described. And then the next one is the percent of change of meeting or exceeding. Those numbers, we do want to see positive numbers on that particular chart. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Connors.
Thank you, Dr. Spalding. I'm still at that transition point. I don't know if I need my glasses or not. So could I just be a bother and have you go back to slide 12 very quickly? So I just want to point out 13. Deputy Superintendent Wolder was up going over the high quality instructional materials. I often revisit a question that school committee member Rivas Mendez asked me at one point about support for teachers using materials. So while it's important that we have high quality instructional materials, if we're not supporting our teachers in the use and implementation of those materials, they're no good. And so when we think about math and Carnegie Learning, we were fortunate enough to be awarded the DESE HQIM 6 through 12 implementation grant. With that came landscape analysis, where our partners in TNTP came in and really looked at math instruction across our 6 through 12 classrooms. They led teacher focus groups and student focus groups to gather data around what do teachers and students need relative to use of the resource. After doing that analysis, an implementation plan was developed by teachers and leaders, and that will start to be put into place this school year. So that's very exciting work. We were also able to send a group of 6 through 12 teachers and leaders to the TNI, the National Institute, with Carnegie Learning to really spend a week doing math in 120-degree weather in Scottsdale, Arizona in July. And it was great to work amongst those leaders. So there's a lot, it's not just the materials that we're using, but what we're doing to support teachers so they can better support students. We also continue with our GLEAM, Growing Literacy Equity Across Massachusetts grant, to support teachers using StudySync. And down at the bottom, you'll see under Supporting All Learners, and this goes back to a piece in Jamie's presentation about educators collaborating with one another. Our partnership with the Learning Acceleration Network. We have our middle school ELA coordinator, Jody Nelson, as well as, at the time, our middle school department heads for both bilingual and special education, working together to talk about literacy instruction and supporting all students. And you'll see in the data the impact of that collaborative work among teachers on all student groups. So thank you. We can go back to, we're going to go to the next slide for this one, please. I'm a visual person, so I'll let you look at the data while I talk about the data. So this particular slide is our students, the percent of change in not meeting expectations. As Dr. Spalding mentioned, we want to see negative numbers in green. So if you'll notice, movement of all student groups out of our not meeting expectations category was notably greater in math. We had growth in both reading and math, but if you notice the significant growth amongst all student groups in math, we definitely believe that that's the impact of the use of Carnegie Learning, using it with fidelity, coupled by coaching, though. We actually have Carnegie Master Practitioners paid for through our grant, who work alongside our teachers to both internalize the HQIM, but also think about what do my students need and how am I planning for instruction that supports their needs. And the impact of that coaching is showing in our student outcomes. If you can go to the next slide, please. So the percent of change into meeting or exceeding expectations, again, now these are positive numbers in green. We are seeing growth across the board. What we are noting the most is meeting or exceeding expectations across all areas for all of our students is what we're seeing. This isn't a surprise to us based on what we're seeing in our district walkthroughs for our classrooms with our curriculum partners. We are seeing a higher level of student engagement and a greater use of the HQIMs across all classrooms with all students. And that is leading to positive outcomes for our students. When we look at the growth, though, again, in this slide as in the one previous, the growth is slightly greater in math than it is in reading. But we also connect this to our Carnegie partners, working side by side in the planning and implementation or the planning and delivery of instruction in our classrooms. So we are working with TNTP and StudySync to provide increased support for all teachers in the area of ELA so that we can start to see greater growth in our reading scores as well. And finally, movement of all student groups into meeting or exceeding in both reading and math. As I'm just going to keep saying it, it's not just the use of the high quality instructional material, it's internalizing that resource and planning for effective instruction, using data around the students in your classroom so that you're planning instruction that meets their needs. So that's middle school in a nutshell. We can go on to high school, please. So you can go on to slide 21, and I'll just go through my notes as you look at the pretty visual. Let me go back to my notes. So these pictures are not as promising, but there is growth in our 9 through 12 level. And if I were a betting woman, which I'm not because I'm cheap, I would bet that when we come to you mid-year, you're going to see significant changes in our high school student performance. So movement of students across all categories that you see here, and you'll see this in our not meeting and our meeting expectations, is reflective of what we're seeing in the walkthroughs, what our Carnegie partners are seeing when they're doing their walkthroughs, what our DESE partners are seeing, is there is low-level student engagement across our 9 through 12 classrooms. It's not just in one high school, it's across our 9 through 12 schools. We're also seeing the impact of an absence of a formalized curriculum in our ELA classrooms, lack of a high-quality instructional resource in ELA, and a lack of the use of Carnegie Math with Fidelity. It is improving, as Deputy Wolder had mentioned. The teachers were able to access greater support from Carnegie this year, and that will continue to grow. We can go to the next slide, please. Our multilingual learners are the only student group, sorry, on the slide previous, you don't have to go back, that decreased in the not meeting expectations category in reading. We do attribute that to the rollout of the new 3D ILIT and the work that they're doing in the ESL classrooms through the bilingual department. An increase in students in the not meeting category is likely the observed impact of the lack of grade level appropriate standards aligned instruction grounded in HQIMs. As you know, thanks to your support, we're restructuring the leadership in the 9 through 12 level. All of our content specific teachers, math, science, English, and social science will have a content expert and a coordinator supporting their work and building their capacity to plan for effective instruction that is grade level appropriate, rigorous, and engaging for our students. So again, I think that you'll start to see a change when we come back together at the mid-year to see the impact of that leadership and the work of the teachers in our classrooms. And I will pass it off to Sean Precious.
Hey everyone, good evening. I have the last slide, so that's super exciting, right? We have one more slide left. I'm going to talk a little bit about our path forward this year in Brockton. So, Tracy, we can jump to the next slide. Thank you. So what's exciting about this slide is that it brings together all of the content and presentations that you all have heard tonight. I have the pleasure and privilege in my role of helping to bring our strategic plan to life, which means I get to partner and collaborate with a lot of the folks on our cabinet and a lot of the folks in our schools. And so you can see at the top here, we have named a strategic focus for the 23-24 school year. We've got a 14-page plan that we have submitted to DESE that is focusing on our students with disabilities in our earliest grades. And that's going to encompass a lot of different types of work streams. So we're going to be working on building school leader capacity around the HQIM, which Dr. Spalding alluded to earlier, as well as implementing universal screening and some of the work that we talked about earlier tonight with inclusion in pre-K. Jamie talked earlier about MTSS as part of the Inclusion Action Plan, as well as our SEL curriculum training and rollout that will launch next week with our administrators and on September 11th across the district. And then at the secondary level, again, this has been alluded to by many of my colleagues this evening. We're going to continue to focus on 9th grade on-track support, really making sure that transition from 8th to 9th grade is sound, as well as more intervention and progress monitoring at the secondary level to ensure that our students are prepared for a variety of post-secondary opportunities. And then finally, again, woven in thread across all of the work tonight is a real focus on better supporting our educators. And so you will see systemic improvements with educator PD and educator evaluation. We have partnered and contracted with PowerSchool, and they will be providing new modules to improve on both of those fronts with both behind-the-scenes technical support as well as external-facing resources, modules, and progress monitoring. So should we pause for questions? And then, yeah. And if you ask a question that I can't answer, I'll just look feverishly to one of my colleagues.
School committee, any questions? Mr. Homer, please.
Sorry, just thinking in terms of the charts that you show when you show the progress across all students. I know there was a quick mention of multilingual learners who came in midway through the year. Their scores and the reports reflect those students' performance. Was that in reference to them arriving the year before and only having been in the district for less than a year before they participated in last year's assessments, or their scores reflect? I see. Okay. So if we were to look at that data without those student-specific performances, we might have seen some different gains. But we have some students that were only here for a very short amount of time. They were asked to take a test that they'd only been in our school district for a few months and weren't. Okay. Thank you. I understand.
It's always fun when folks answer their own questions. That was great.
Can I just make one point too? Yeah. It's interesting that you bring that up because I actually had a conversation just going back and looking at this data again. I was asking that same question because when you look at, I'll just use this one of the secondary slides as an example. It's actually flat for our multilingual learners, which is it's not necessarily a bad thing if you take into account, to your point, Mr. Homer, our newcomers coming in who are just taking this test are captured in that data. So we're not necessarily seeing that true growth. So we need to drill down and disaggregate it that way to show our multilingual learners who were here the year before, who just arrived this year, who just arrived January 1st, and what does that data look like? So we will be working on that.
Thank you, Mr. Homer. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, Mr. Mayor, the last one is any items to refer to subcommittee.
Are there any matters that are being referred to subcommittee?
I just want to schedule, sorry.
Yep.
I'd like
Ms.
to.
Azak, I'm sorry, Ms.
It's
Azak.
okay. I'd like to have a safety, traffic, and transportation subcommittee scheduled for sometime in September, so we can get an update after school starts, how everything's going. And then I know I need to also schedule a policy manual subcommittee. So if I could get those on in September as well, I'll coordinate with the members.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other subcommittee matters? Mr. Sullivan, please.
Yes, tonight we had to postpone the superintendent's contract.
Yes.
We haven't got a date for the next one, when it's going to take place.
That will have to be worked out with Belinda and the vice chair.
Yes, Kathy and Melinda, yeah. Reason why it was postponed is we ran out of time.
Right.
Just so the people that weren't here know that.
Oh, I thought he was talking about coming in next Tuesday, and
I think,
We could schedule for our next regular school committee meeting ahead of time.
Yeah.
All right.
We don't have another school committee meeting in the month of August. We have it in September when school starts.
October 1st. For the DESI regulations is October 1st, correct, Karen? Yep.
So we'll have the vice chair, Mr. Sullivan, work with Mrs. Campbell. Thank you.
just didn't want it to get forgotten.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely not, no. Any other committee members have anything relative to subcommittee? Agenda 6 is unfinished business, and there's two matters. There's discussion of potential adoption of the JICFB bullying prevention policy, and also discussion of potential vote of the policy subcommittee meeting dated August 15, 2023.
Mayor?
Ms. Azak, please.
Okay, so under the second bullet point, discussion and potential vote under the policy subcommittee meeting, we met earlier this evening, and the committee voted on the Brockton High School dress code. So just so we have it on the record, that we approved bullet points 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. We removed bullet point number 8 as far as voting on that, and we moved it to a later date. The vote was to wait till school starts, see the hood policy, wearing the hooded sweatshirt policy, see how that goes, and we're going to get an update from the superintendent / principal of the high school after school starts. And I believe a few of the members just felt, let's give the students an opportunity to adhere to no hoods, don't have the hoods on. And if that works out, great. If not, we're going to revisit it and vote on it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for that detailed summary, Ms. Azak. Any other matters relative to the unfinished business, the discussion potential vote of the bullying prevention policy? Yep. Mrs. Sullivan, please.
All three. Attendance, cell phone, dress code.
Relative to the bullying and prevention policy, though, we could take a vote on that this evening, correct? Is there a motion relative to that?
To answer them?
Are there any questions? All right, motion to accept the JICFB bullying prevention policy.
Second.
It's a motion on the floor by Mrs. Rivas Mendez. It was probably seconded by Ms. Azak. All in favor of that, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Passes unanimous. And then relative to the policy subcommittee meeting, Ms. Azak, are we taking a vote on that tonight, or did you, what you just?
I believe
Yes.
they need a vote, so I can reread that. So the motion was to approve the Brockton High School dress code, approving bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8, as stated in our handout.
It's a form of a motion.
Yes.
Is there a second on the
Second.
motion? Mrs. Rivas Mendez. So it was made by Ms. Azak, probably seconded by Mrs. Rivas Mendez. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Passes. We will now go on to Agenda 7, which is the new
Yeah, I think
business.
you got to finish the attendance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think we have the cell phone one.
Cell phone and attendance have to be
Yes.
voted
Yep.
through.
Okay.
So the,
Do a motion to approve the Brockton High School electronic devices policy, but actually, we spoke
Which
about
would be
adding this to
expanded
middle school
to-
as well.
district-wide.
District-wide, so it's going to be district-wide, motion for a district-wide electronic devices policy.
Second.
Motion was made by Ms. Azak, properly seconded by Mrs. Rivas Mendez. All in favor, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. Passes.
And the third one is a motion to accept the proposed attendance policy, and that would be district-wide as
That
well.
would be 9 to 12.
9 through
Grades
12.
9 to 12.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made for the record, Mrs. Rivas Mendez, properly seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. All in favor of that, kindly raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. It passes. Thank you, members. Agenda 7 is new business, BPS Student Parent Handbooks 2023, 2024, and there's action requested on that.
That's the approval of the student handbooks.
Motion to accept the Brockton Public Schools Student Parent Handbooks, 2023, 2024.
So motion on the floor, is there a second? Motion was made by Mrs. Sullivan, it was properly seconded by Mr. Sullivan. All in favor of that, kindly raise your hand. Raise your hand if you oppose. Passes. Next matter is donation of surplus educational materials.
Aldo, you want to
Mr.
come up for that?
Petronio? Good evening, Aldo.
Good evening. As you know, over the past year and a half or so, we put all new curriculum in all of our schools. In doing so, we have hundreds and hundreds of books and materials that we have basically stored in a warehouse now that has close to no value, but I do need to bring it forward to ask your permission to either put it out to auction or to basically donate it. We have to look at each item and see what they're worth, the amount of quantities we have of each, and what to do and so on. But I wanted to bring it to the school committee's attention that during the pandemic, as you know, we emptied the schools, we removed desks, tables, chairs, all kinds of furniture, all kinds of devices. So in doing so, we're storing a lot of that in the warehouse. The books and materials I can price and put out. Most of the tables and chairs that were in there, if they were any good, we reuse some of them. The old ones that are in there aren't in great shape. They can either be thrown away, or again, if I can find that there's some residual value, we could sell them, or we could donate them to a local charity or someone else that could use it. So I'd just like the permission of the committee to move forward. Anything that's over $10,000 in value, we put out to sealed bid. Anything under $10,000 in value, we can determine ourselves what our best method is to remove, because sometimes it will cost us more for dumpsters to throw it away than it would be to give it away, have someone come take it from us and remove it, so.
Thank you, Mr. Petronio. Just a point of information. The mayor's office spent $40 to ship some books over to Cabo Verde. When I went to travel to Cape Verde and last December with Bridgewater State, there was a dire need for English books. Subsequently, we've heard from Nigeria, Angola, Cameroon, Haiti, the Caribbean authentic nations that are tied into that organization. So, instead of throwing out books or throwing them in, recycle, I strongly would recommend that we could repurpose them, reuse them, and help people here and abroad as well. We're also actively working right now with the Red Cross and United Way for the tragedy in Maui in Hawaii. We need to try to see what we can do to help the folks over there as well. So thank you, Mr. Petronio. Any questions for the CFO relative? Ms. Azak, please.
Thank you, Mr. Petronio. Just a quick question. This is wonderful. I toured the warehouse, so we do have some really good stuff that, it's outdated for us. We have new curriculum. How are we gonna figure out who's gonna get what, to be fair?
That's what
all.
we have to figure, that's.
Or it's, first come, first serve, and as we go down the list, as we get things, there's so many different countries that really need what we have. So just to be fair, there's so many of them, and we have such a diverse group in our community. So, and will we get a list of what we're deeming surplus?
Yes.
And where it's going? Okay, just so we, there's a lot of stuff.
Yes, we've worked with a lot of these agencies before, and so we'll try to, evenly give out what we can. A big thing is a lot of them want the stuff but have no place to put it, and that's a problem because we need to remove it from our warehouse space. So sometimes someone might get more than others because some organizations have free shipping containers that they fill and they ship overseas, whereas others want us to store it and hold on to it, and we can't. We're at a point now where there's so much of it, we have to figure a way to move it.
No, definitely, storage is an issue. I just know from donations that I get, I'm limited as to how long I can hold on to them. So,
Aldo,
that's
we
priority, I guess.
come back to a policy meeting to make a decision on how we distribute? And I think it'd be fair to, we have to do it together to figure out.
Can you do that, or just evenly as possible? Just distribute them as evenly as possible?
But as you mentioned, Mr. Petronio, we don't have the space. So
Yeah,
those
right.
that have the space to take it right away would make sense. And then we can just always keep the other organizations, throughout the year, we're always updating and doing things, but it doesn't make sense for us to pay storage, and it's so expensive, to store things that we can't use.
Correct.
Especially with a lot of budget cuts that we have. So I say first come, first serve, and those that can take it.
We have done sealed bids for items like this kitchen equipment that we sold off. A lot of it was new or close to new that we had bought before the pandemic. And those we've put out and received our bids, and we've collected the checks on those. So whatever we can do, we will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Azak. Mr. Rodriguez, please.
Before we, take a formal vote on the surplus materials, I would like to see an itemized list of what we actually have to deem surplus before we just, vote for something that I've toured the warehouse. I know there's a lot of stuff there. Cape Verdean descent, we'll take the whole warehouse, I'll be honest with you, because there's a need in Cape Verde for that, but we still also have the other community members, as the mayor stated, which his office deals with on a daily basis, and working with the mayor's office, we can determine,
Any of the, like the medical type supplies that we received for the pandemic, those you're allowed to give to other state agencies without having to go and declare it surplus and whatnot. So I know the mayor has
We've offered some of the masks and the test kits if they're going to expire, and even some of the disinfectant expires. We've reached out to nursing homes, Brockton Neighborhood Health Center, the hospitals as well. But I support what Mr. Rodriguez said. If we could come out with a breakdown, I think that'd be helpful for the committee as a whole.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Petronio? Mr. Petronio, did you want to give an update on the budget at all in any capacity?
Yes, thank you. Chris and I have been working on tying out the FY23 budget since the close of the fiscal year several weeks ago. We informed the superintendent that we're anticipating deficits in several accounts that we may not be able to clear this year. We notified the city CFO, the mayor, last Thursday that due to the costs such as out-of-district tuitions, McKinney-Vento homeless costs, sped transportation, loss of enrollment, and overstaffing, that we're out of balance in many of those accounts. A lot of this is out of our control, as you know, happened to us between the pandemic and students moving. As a result of meeting with the mayor, we notified our outside auditors, CLA, Clifton, Larson, Allen, as to go through all the accounts to determine what's the best way we can handle the deficits in each one. You're allowed on some types of deficits, if you know there's a reimbursement coming in, like out-of-district tuitions, you're allowed to carry that deficit, and then when the reimbursements come in from the state, you can then go back and offset those deficits. So a lot of what we have, we're going to work with them to see what we can do. But it is safe to assume we will be out of balance for the end of the year for our financials. Again, working with CLA, they will advise us as to what we can clear and how we can do it, and what we can carry and what we can't carry. We don't have any hard numbers as of yet, but we will prepare some reports as soon as we get some definites on balancing and what the outside auditors are going to require us to do.
Mr. Rodriguez?
We didn't receive any extra funding with the governor's surplus budget.
No, when the governor signed the budget, in actuality, the school district lost a little money. They gave more to charter schools and gave us less, but the city CFO and the mayor set the budget off of the governor's budget because everything was so late this year. So we didn't make out as well with the state budget as we had planned. There's supposed to be a supplemental coming through. I've been checking every day. I haven't seen any numbers come through on that. We're really hoping that we'll pick up something there. But I think between the governor's budget and the final budget, the governor's the first one to put up, but the final budget from the compromise committee, we're down about $1.1 million overall. And again, most of that money went to charter schools.
We also going to wait to see what comes out with the state of emergency that she just declared. That might also help us with immigration, and students have come into the district.
Just point of information, I went into Boston today at the invitation of Congressman Stephen Lynch, and I had lunch with Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, who some say will be the next Speaker of the House for United States House. He's Cape Verdean descent. He's a boxing fan.
He's a relative.
Is he? Well, well, he's from Brooklyn. He likes the Yankees. I tried to turn him over on that one, but he's going to come to visit Brockton. The congressman Stephen has advocated for us since I've been mayor. So we're trying to turn over every rock on the federal level to see if there's additional money that the city, not just the schools, but the schools in the city are one, in my opinion. So we're seeing if we can get some more federal money as well. You mentioned the CFO. I'd be remiss to say our condolences to Troy Clarkson. His stepfather passed away yesterday morning, and our thoughts and prayers go out to him and his family. Thank you, Aldo. Any other matters before us? Ms. Azak, please.
Bear with me, I have 3 items. It's been a long night, but I want to take a moment and just acknowledge the passing of Bob Jones.
Yes.
He passed away, I believe, a couple weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago. So, Mr. Jones was very active as one of our superintendents, and it was a pleasure to get to know him this past year. He was just a wealth of knowledge, and just listening to him was a pleasure. So it's sad, when he passed. So we were just thinking of his family, and we just, want to thank him for all those years that he dedicated to Brockton Public Schools. Second item is I know many love to hear this, but thank you to Cradles to Crayons. We had an amazing day last Friday. Absolutely amazing. It was exhausting. We gave over 5,000 backpacks. I think probably 5,500. I still have a few left. Thank you to Mr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Mendez, Ward Counselor Shirley Azak, my niece Georgina. Bear with me because there was a lot of help and they were out there for hours and hours. Thank you to newly retired Principal Michelle Nizrella, which is all I heard was, "Hi, Principal Nizrella." So it's wonderful for the students to see, their past principal. So they were all excited. Let's see, we have Kelly Hanlon, Linda Petrantonio, Linda Pizzi and her crew, Mary Waldron, Kat Porzat, Deanna Greenstein, Lisa Early, Felicia Chalmers and her crew, Jose, Izzy, and Brianna, Michelle Harris and her son Jonathan. He was amazing. All these kids were amazing. Let's see, we have Jenny Joyce and the Boy Scouts, and then Deli Gonzalez. I know I missed some names, but we will acknowledge you online. Things have been crazy trying to play catch up, but amazing event. And next year, we're going to do things a little differently, but it was a constant line.
To thank the mayor's office, because I know they were there, because they were excited.
Oh, yes,
to be there.
I apologize.
They won't let me in the office, Rob. You don't thank them, so.
I apologize, Mayor. So John Messia was there, and a few, a few others from the mayor's office. I apologize. And last is this weekend they have the first responders event. Mayor, do you have the times on that?
It's at
11 to 3 on Saturday. Is it at the fairgrounds?
Yes.
So 11 to 3 on Saturday at the fairgrounds. It's a free event. It's going to be a wonderful day. Those that can make it, please come out. It's always wonderful to interact with our first responders. And, they're all up there on Saturdays. So if you have little ones or just want to come out, just come out and give them support and enjoy your afternoon. But those are my 3 items.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Any additional comments? I just wanted to share with you, I was on a radio show last Monday night from 6 to 8, and Coach Wiggy, Jermaine Wiggins, joined in on the show. Everybody should be extremely proud of the leader that we have leading the Brockton Boxers right now. What he articulated on that show is what we wanted to hear. It's not just about X and O's and wins and victories on the football field. It's about academics and going, hopefully, to pursue a higher education degree as well. So I was extremely impressed with what he said, and I just want to let you all know that that wasn't just in Brockton. That was heard throughout Plymouth County. So kudos to the coach. Any other comments at this time? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn, please. Mrs. Sullivan made a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Rivas Mendez. All in favor? All opposed? Have a good night. Drive careful.